Marcus bowed solemnly to me and said with a very serious expression, "Miss Catherine, please. Our territory is very unsafe now, and Mr. Buffay may be in danger again at any time." I looked at Athan Buffay, who was sitting on the bed with his left hand on his right arm. The bruises on his cheeks had not gone away, and obvious scars could be seen on the bridge of his nose and brow bone. He suffered multiple injuries to his upper body, and his entire right arm was in a cast. Thinking that it was so difficult for him to even sit up just now, it was not difficult to imagine the severity of his injury. David Hunter's people were menacing, and now the two packs had entered the war. Once their spies found that Athan Buffay was still alive, they would do everything possible to kill him. But there were two of my kids at home, and I couldn't put them in danger too. "Is there no other way?" I asked Athan Buffay. "If they find you in my house, then my kids—" "No, I can't put them in danger." Athan Buffay nodded. "Catherine is right. Mike and Lily can't be in danger." He looked at Marcus. "Think of another way." Marcus wanted to say more, but was stopped by Athan Buffay. I was a little sorry, and while I hoped to be able to help, as a mother, I had to keep my kids safe first. Suddenly, I thought of a better way. I stepped forward and said to Athan Buffay, "I know a place that is safer than my home." Athan Buffay raised his eyebrows. His eyes lit up. "Actually, I also have an apartment in my name that I just bought a while ago," I explained. "I did not use my birth name, Catherine Green, when I signed the purchase agreement, but my husband's surname. The name is Catherine Harden. So even if someone wanted to look for a property in my name, it would be impossible to find it for the time being. Since I married Jack, although we were nominally husband and wife, we had always respected each other and slept in separate rooms, and we had always lived in properties in Jack's name. I had always felt that I owed Jack too much, so I tried to avoid his feelings for me because I didn't want him to think that my responses to him were all about gratitude. For 5 years, I had worked hard to make money and put all my savings into a down payment on this apartment. I used Catherine Harden's name when I signed the deal, actually to surprise Jack. I was going to tell him this way that I wanted to have a real family with him. After all, there was probably no other person in the world who loved my children more than Jack. I just didn't expect that. Before I had time to tell Jack the good news, he was hospitalized due to illness. Since then, I had been running every day trying to find a donor for Jack, and of course I had no chance to talk to Jack about the apartment again. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but get a little excited. Unexpectedly, this apartment could help Athan Buffay hide one day, and I was very happy to be able to help. Unexpectedly, Athan Buffay's face became more and more angry. When he heard my husband's surname, he suddenly slammed the bedside table on his left very hard and said loudly, "No." The beautifully made marble bedside table was smashed by him. With a loud noise, I could see there were some fine cracks appeared on the table. Athan Buffay's fist quickly became red and swollen, but his face didn't change at all. His eyes were full of indifference, and his eyes were slightly red. I was startled by his reaction. I felt confused and panicked at the same time. Could it be that I said something wrong to anger him? The atmosphere in the room dropped to freezing point, and I felt Athan Buffay's aura rolling over the room little by little. "Marcus, get out!" Athan Buffay's voice was low, but full of irresistible majesty. Marcus, who had always been calm, seemed to be unable to resist this powerful aura. He gave me a sympathetic look, turned and exited the door of the room. The moment Marcus closed the door, I only felt Athan Buffay released his aura, and I instantly felt a suffocating pressure. Before I could react, Athan Buffay came to me almost instantly. He grabbed my chin roughly, forcing me to look up at him. The bandage on his body was torn by the rough action, and I could vaguely see more and more red blood oozing from the wound under the bandage. "Athan, what's wrong with you? Your wound is open." I opened my mouth eagerly, but Athan Buffay didn't seem to hear at all. His body bowed slightly, and the force of the fingers pinching my chin became heavier and heavier. I was forced to look him in the eyes. His pupils turned golden like never before. He was out of control. I wanted to run away, but couldn't move. Athan Buffay's lips parted slightly, his voice hoarse. "Tell me, you're mine." A trembling feeling came from the depths of my soul. and I suddenly realized that I couldn't move not because of fear, but because of my fateful surrender to the man in front of me. I murmured unconsciously, "I am yours. I am your mate." I had a dream. I was in the whole patch of lavender flowers, the rich floral scent pushing towards me like a wave. The gentle moonlight shone on me like lover's gaze. There was a man. The man's shoulders were broad and strong. His strong arms hugged me tightly, and I was shaking and screaming under him. I was immersed in that endless pleasure, and I felt a sense of belonging in my heart like never before. "My mate," he whispered in my ear, his breath making me feel a little itchy. Then he kissed my lips, and I put my arms around his neck. The other spirit inside of me seemed to be constantly clamoring to get out of the way. I looked into the man's eyes. His golden pupils shined brightly in the moonlight. "Miss Catherine, wake up!" I opened my eyes. The blinding white light made me unable to see the person in front of me for a while. I struggled to get up from the ground, only to feel a headache. Only then did I see Marcus' face in front of me. Where am I? What happened? My body was sore, and I just remembered Athan Buffay suddenly getting angry and out of control, his wolf taking control of his body. Afterwards, the memory became more and more blurred. "You are still in the ward. You may have fainted from a shock just now. I have asked the doctor to examine you just now. There is no trauma on your body. It seems that Mr. Buffay did not hurt you," Marcus said. Breathed a sigh of relief. I asked suspiciously, "Where's Athan? Where is he?" Marcus sighed. His eyes passed me and behind me. I turned around and saw a row of iron fences now where the hospital bed was. Athan Buffay huddled in the corner with his back to the door, his body shaking slightly. Mr. Buffay suddenly lost control just now, and we had to isolate him immediately. Marcus pointed to the ceiling, indicating to me that the iron fence appeared from there. I couldn't understand the situation in front of me. "He's your leader. How can you lock him up?" Marcus shook his head and said, "It's Mr. Buffay's own rules. He probably hasn't mentioned it to you since he had his wolf. He's been suppressing his wolf and his werewolf nature." According to Marcus, Athan Buffay was a natural leader. He was physically developed from an early age, in excellent physical condition, and had a very bright mind. Athan was always the fastest runner and the furthest jumper among all of Pack's peers. In daily physical training, he could hardly find an opponent who could compete with him among his peers. We grew up looking at him as our future leader because he was born to be that way. He was chosen by the moon goddess, Marcus said. However, everything changed on Athan Buffay's 11th birthday. As Marcus said, Athan Buffay was too powerful. The ordinary werewolves generally got their wolves between the age 13 to 16 years old, but Athan Buffay's wolf was much earlier. On the first day of his 11-year-old, his wolf woke up. Athan Buffay's wolf was very powerful. After having a wolf, Athan Buffay's physical fitness and potential had been greatly improved. His fighting prowess even surpassed some of the grown-up werewolves in the pack. But also because of this wolf was extremely difficult to control. Whenever Athan Buffay taken over by his wolf, he became extremely brutal and scary. Therefore, Athan Buffay often lived in a state of involuntary control after being controlled by his werewolf. Every day since then, Mr. Mike Buffay has been training his willpower to suppress and control his wolf, Marcus said. I recalled when I first met Athan Buffay. He controlled the color of his pupils so easily. Then I wondered how easily he could control his werewolf attributes. It turned out that he had been training for many years. "Why did it get out of hand today, since you said he's been training for a long time?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. Mr. Buffay was free to control his wolf most of the time. In fact, I had only seen him lose control twice since he was an adult. I turned to look at Athan Buffay's back. The wounds on his body had already opened due to his previous actions. He was like a warrior who had not recovered after a bloody battle. "Put me in, Marcus," I said softly. "What? Catherine, you don't understand. Mr. Buffay is in danger at this time," Marcus said to me eagerly. I shook my head firmly and stared at Athan Buffay. No, he needs strength right now. The iron fence was tucked into the ceiling trap, and Marcus had left the ward long before that. I slowly approached Athan Buffay, who was still facing the wall with his back to me. I reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. "Athan." I was punched against the wall with a lot of force by Athan Buffay. Immediately, he teleported to me at a very fast speed. His big hands tightly grabbed my neck, and his golden eyes stared at me. I grabbed his arm with all my strength, staring into his eyes, and said intermittently, "Athan Buffay, wake up!" Those golden pupils trembled, and a tear slowly flowed from the corner of his eyes, and then I saw the deep dark green I was familiar with. Great! He is back! Just when I breathed a sigh of relief, Athan Buffay suddenly and rudely kissed me. He didn't wake up. Right now I was stuck against the wall, with no way out. Athan Buffay's right hand raised my hands above my head and pressed them against the wall. His left hand was caressing me wantonly. His kisses were wild and intense, and he almost took my breath away, but he had no intention of stopping. Why? His wolf was still controlling him. I bit his lip fiercely, but it irritated him even more. The thick smell of blood filled the air, but he didn't want to stop at all. He tore my clothes as if testing my bottom line. A familiar feeling came over my head, the helpless fear, the desperation that was about to be swallowed up. The person in front of me seemed to take me back to that night 5 years ago. I growled from my throat, while my tears were dripping on his cheek. "No, please." I looked at him pleadingly, and at this moment, Athan Buffay seemed to have just woken up. He let go of my grip, took a step back, and rushed out of the room. I slowly sat on the ground and gently rubbed my swollen wrist. Everything just now made me feel in a trance, and I couldn't help shaking all over. Athan Buffay just now made me feel inexplicably familiar. He reminded me of the man 5 years ago. Would it be him? No, not possible. The man kept saying I was his mate, but Marcus said, Athan Buffay never had a mate. It couldn't be him. I shook my head, trying to make myself forget the scene just now. He's just out of control. Don't think about it. I slowly calmed down, but my body still felt a little sore, so I had to stay on the ground for a while. After a long time, the door slowly opened. Athan Buffay walked in slowly. He stood in front of me, and I looked up at him. His wounds were all torn open, and the tattered bandages on his body were stained red with blood. There were mixed emotions in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm out of control again. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt anyone." His eyes were reddish, and he looked like a child who had made a mistake. I stood up slowly and gently removed the bandages for him. I looked at his face and suddenly thought of myself. Over the years, I grew up in an unwelcome place, bullied by my own family and abandoned by my biological father. I struggle alone. I fought for myself because no one would fight for me. I always felt bad for myself. Today, however, I learned that Athan Buffay, who I always thought was powerful, had faced loneliness countless times by himself. In order to suppress the wolf in his body, he would not hesitate to lock himself up and refuse anyone's approach. He buried all his frailties in his heart, just to be the leader everyone looked up to. Turned out we were no different. Athan Buffay just looked at me silently and didn't speak. His expression was so sad, and I knew he was disappointed in himself. I reached out and wrapped my arms around Athan Buffay lightly. His body was a little stiff, and I patted his shoulder lightly, feeling his muscles gradually relaxed. Rock-a-bye baby in the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the rough breaks, the cradle will fall. And down will come baby, cradle and all. I hummed softly, the lullaby I used to sing to Mike and Lily. Gradually, Athan Buffay hugged me back. He buried his head in my neck and let out a soft sob. Athan Buffay's wound had worsened due to the previous drama, so we postponed our move until the next night. To be safe, I did not leave Pack Gym, but simply washed up and rested for a few hours in another ward. It was not until the night of the second day that we quietly set off. My apartment was in the north of the city, almost an hour's drive from Athan Buffay's private villa in the south. Marcus kept his eyes on the surroundings as he drove along the way, and I was nervous about any vehicle I saw. And Athan Buffay had long since changed back to the demon who tortured me all day long like a king. He kept ordering me to give him water and massage, and used my legs as pillows for sleep. There were a lot of vehicles on the highway late at night, but gradually decreased when entering city roads. My apartment was in a far location, so it was almost impossible to see pedestrians late at night. We arrived at the apartment smoothly. Marcus left quickly after helping us carry our luggage upstairs. I closed the apartment door and sighed softly. It was originally a surprise for the children and Jack, but now it was enjoyed by Athan Buffay in advance. However, the man didn't feel sorry for it in the slightest. The apartment was small in size and had a simple structure of 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. After wandering around the empty living room, Athan Buffay entered the bedroom again. After confirming that the bathroom in the guest bedroom had all the necessities he needed, I was ready to enter the master bedroom to rest. Unexpectedly, at this moment, I was suddenly hugged from behind. Athan Buffay's low voice sounded, "Why don't you stay in my room and take care of me?" I pushed him away gently. This guy was teasing me almost all the time. But what I didn't see was that there was a deep sadness in his seemingly calm eyes. At night, I had that dream again. The same lavender field, the same man and his golden pupils. He hugged me, kissed me, caressed me. He whispered in my ear, "My mate, my Luna." Then I woke up suddenly in a cold sweat. The face of the man in the dream was exactly the same as Athan Buffay. I took a deep breath and told myself again, "That's impossible. It won't be him." With apprehension, I slowly fell asleep again. Marcus had explained to me before leaving that since I had been with Athan Buffay, David Hunter's people might also be searching for me. So for the safety of my kids and Jack, I should try not to be in any places that I frequently be for a short period of time. Early in the morning, I woke up in my apartment north of the city, looked out the window and sighed. For the next week, I will be living in this apartment with Athan Buffay. I turned on my phone and searched for news about Athan Buffay. As Marcus said, there was a lot of speculation about Athan Buffay's situation, and many reporters had gathered around Athan Buffay's company and his villa to find clues about him. Sure enough, it was right to move him. I opened the door and saw Athan Buffay's door was opened. I went in and saw that he wasn't there. At this time, I heard a loud noise from the kitchen. When I arrived in a hurry, I found that Athan Buffay was leaning down and picking up a knife from the ground. It seemed that the loud noise just now was that he accidentally dropped the knife. His left hand was in a plaster cast, and there were wounds on his leg, so he couldn't squat down. It made him look so funny, I couldn't help laughing. "Hey," I looked at his blushing face. "Need help?" "No need." Athan Buffay seemed to be displeased with my jeering at him. He gently picked the knife with his toes, reached out with his left hand, grabbed the handle, and rinsed the knife in the sink. Then he looked up at me and raised his chin. "Go and rest. I will make breakfast." I shrugged. I didn't think Athan Buffay could cook. However, half an hour later, a burning smell came from the kitchen. I was startled and hurried into the kitchen to find Athan Buffay holding up a frying pan with nothing but a black patch at the bottom that made it impossible to tell what food was. Athan Buffay looked at me and criticized very unpleasantly. "Won't you buy a better quality pan? Don't even have the money to buy a new pan for me." I spread my hands. "Sorry, Mr. Buffay, that's my only pot." Today's Athan Buffay was like a childish teenager. After forcing me to go to the supermarket to buy the most expensive pot according to his request, he told me to sit in the living room and wait for breakfast. So it wasn't until 12 noon that I finally had breakfast made by the great Athan Buffay, a plate of slightly darkened scrambled eggs and slightly burned toast. I took a bite and he hurriedly asked, "How is it? Is it delicious?" I couldn't bear to crash his confidence, so I nodded and replied, "It's great." Then he raised his mouth proudly and then said a little embarrassedly, "Catherine, about that night, I almost hurt you. I want to apologize to you again." I stopped, put down the cutlery, nodded solemnly and looked at him. "I forgive you, Athan." Then I raised my head and looked at him. "Then there is one thing I also need to ask you. I hope you can tell me the truth." Athan Buffay just looked at me silently and didn't speak. 5 years ago, have you ever been to the lavender fields on the border of the Blue Moon Pack? I stared at him closely. Since that night, Athan Buffay had become more and more familiar to me. His body, his scent, his kiss, and his golden pupils. All of this was eerily similar to that night in the lavender field 5 years ago. Especially every time I get close to him, I felt an involuntary emotion that made me want to get close to him. And as for last night's dream, I couldn't help but thought that the person that night was him. However, if it was really him, then he was the father of my children. I didn't know if I could face this man normally anymore. I clenched my fists unknowingly, my palms sweating slightly from the tension. Athan Buffay's expression changed a few times. Then he lowered his head and said softly, "No, I've never been to the Blue Moon Pack." My tense body felt a little out of strength because of the sudden relaxation. Fortunately, it was not him. I let out a long sigh of relief and went back to eating. Sure enough, I thought too much. Athan Buffay smiled softly. He just looked at me so quietly and stayed with me to finish my lunch. When I finally asked the question that had been plaguing me, I felt extremely relieved. Just then, Athan Buffay's phone rang. He picked up the phone. "Marcus, how's everything?" Then his movement stopped. He looked at me and said to the phone, "You said you caught Thana Green?" "Yeah. When I got back around the villa last night, I found someone in the woods. I chased her and found it was a werewolf, and I caught her before I found out she was Thana Green," Marcus said over the phone. I was a little puzzled and asked Athan Buffay. I remember Marcus telling me that Thana Green ran away that day before I was rescued. "Why did she go back to you?" Athan Buffay shook his head. "Since that day, I have been sending people to find Thana Green's whereabouts, but she seems to have disappeared." Then he asked into the phone, "Did Thana Green say anything?" "She wants to see Miss Catherine," Marcus replied. Athan Buffay pondered for a moment, then said to Marcus, "Not yet. This may be their means to draw me out. Lock her first, and ask some information from her mouth." I nodded. I wasn't ready to face this little sister of mine since that night. Even though she teased me and humiliated me before, that day I really felt how much she wanted me to die. As if sensing my emotions, Athan Buffay gently held my hand. "I see," Marcus said. "Mr. Buffay, one more thing. Your medical advisor is ready to provide you with a physical examination. Since you are still seriously injured, we will have an examination in 3 days later." After hearing what Marcus said, I was stunned. "An examination? Is it for Jack's surgery?" Seeing that I hadn't spoken, Athan Buffay lightly tapped my forehead with his finger and said, "Have you forgotten that your husband's surgery is just a week later?" I just realized that after experiencing the assassination and explosion, he still remembered Jack's surgery. I looked at Athan Buffay feeling so moved. Without hesitation, I hugged his neck and kissed him on the cheek. "Thank you, Athan." Athan Buffay didn't expect me to kiss him. After a while, he burst out laughing. "Remember to kiss here next time." He pointed to his lips and said to me. I rolled my eyes at him, feeling extremely excited. Catherine, Athan Buffay, who had hung up at some point, looked at me and said, "Are you going to be back with Jack after the surgery?" I didn't expect him to suddenly ask this question, and I was stunned. However, after what happened during this time, I have come to understand that in my heart, Jack has always been my family, the nominal father of my children, but not the man I love. I looked at the man in front of me and nodded. I was about to speak but was interrupted by a rush of phone ringing. On the other end of the phone is Mindy, the children's nanny. I picked up the phone and there was Mindy's anxious voice. "Catherine, come to the hospital quickly. Mike got into a fight with a kid in kindergarten today." When I heard Mike was in the hospital, I was in a panic. I stood up abruptly and asked over the phone, "Is Mike hurt? What's going on? I can't go over right now. It's okay, Catherine." Athan stood up and put on his coat. "Which hospital? Let's go to it now." The address of the hospital was next to the kindergarten. When we arrived, Mindy was standing anxiously, pacing back and forth outside the door. Seeing me coming, she hurried to meet me. "Mindy, is Mike okay? Where is he?" I asked eagerly. Mindy looked worried. "Mike is fine. He's not injured, but another child was injured by him with a chair." I felt a little unbelievable. How can that be? Mike is only a 5-year-old. How does he have the strength to move a chair and throw it at someone? At this moment, the kindergarten teacher came out of the ward, and when she saw me coming, she hurried over and explained to me, "The student is fine, but there are some abrasions on his arm." Her face was a little pale. Said, "Frankly speaking, it's my fault. The boy always told me that Mike's eyes will change color these days, and I perfunctory him. I didn't expect him to point at Mike during play hours today and call him a little monster. My eyes widened when I heard eyes change color. The discoloration of the eyes is the characteristic of the werewolf after having a wolf, This is impossible. Mike is only 5 years old. Just then, Mike came out of the ward. Tears flowed out of his eyes when he saw me. He threw himself in my arms and cried and said to me, "Mommy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." I put Mike in my arms, feeling distressed. Mike was still crying, sobbing and asking, "Mommy, they all say I'm a little monster. Is that true?" "It just means that you are special." Athan Buffay's voice sounded behind him. Mike stuck his head out of my arms and looked at him. Athan Buffay looked at Mike's eyes brightly. He lowered his voice and smiled and said, "This should be something you be proud of, Mike." My little boy stared at this strange man who just smiled at him, and he asked, "Who are you?" Athan walked towards us and reached out his hand to Mike. "Hi, Mike. Nice to finally meet you. You can call me Athan." Mike was still in my arms, watching Athan Buffay carefully. Even though the man in front of him looked very tall and fierce, Mike was not at all afraid, and full of curiosity about him. Athan Buffay seemed to be patient, holding out his hand for Mike's response. After a while, Mike loosened his arms around me and gently grabbed Athan Buffay's index finger. At this time, Mike's teacher came out of the ward with the injured student. The child was full of tears, and his elbow was bandaged, but I could still vaguely see the wounds left by the previous injury on his clothes. Blood stains. A man came out immediately behind the child. The man looked very angry and should be the kid's father. The teacher introduced, "This is Mr. Wick. This is his son Timmy. Mr. Wick, this is Mike's mother, Catherine Green." The man glanced at me when he heard it and snorted. Just as I was about to step up to apologize, Athan Buffay walked right up to the man. "Hello." He held out his hand. "Sorry about what happened." Athan Buffay's natural sense of oppression made the man take a step back unconsciously, but he still said to me with a strong attitude, "How did you educate your son? How can you let him be so violent?" "I'm so sorry, Mr. Wick." I looked down at Mike. Mike apologized to Timmy, who knew that Mike, who was usually obedient, kept his head down and said nothing. I kneeled down and looked at Mike face to face. "Mike, what's wrong?" At this moment, I clearly saw a flash of gold in Mike's green pupils. I was shocked that Mike's eyes actually changed color. How was that possible? "See," the man raised his voice, "your son doesn't think he did anything wrong at all. Don't think you can bully my son casually. I'm going to sue you. I'm not going to allow such a dangerous child to stay in kindergarten." "Okay," Athan Buffay's grim voice sounded, "then you can go and sue us then." He took out a business card holder from his pocket and handed it to the man. "This is my team of lawyers. Please contact them." "Don't scare me with a team of lawyers. I'm a lawyer myself. I want you to compensate me for my medical expenses and mental damages." The man threatened incessantly while taking the business card, and suddenly he stopped. His eyes stared blankly at the words on the business card and muttered, "Crescent Security Company Legal Department." The expression on the man's face became a little nervous. It seemed that the name of Athan Buffay's company was useful everywhere. The man changed his facial expression instantly, and he said with a slightly embarrassed expression, "Forget it. I don't need to sue, but how do you want to compensate me?" "Compensation for medical expenses is not a problem," Athan said with a relaxed expression. "However, who told you that this was just our fault? There is something wrong with both children in this matter, but it is indeed Timmy who provoked Mike first. Mr. Wick, it is normal for children to have such conflicts. Since Mike's parents are willing to pay for the medical expenses, you can settle it then. Let's go." The kindergarten teacher spoke at this time, and she looked at the man slightly dissatisfied and seemed to think that he was making too much of a fuss. The man looked at Athan Buffay cautiously and left with his son a little unwillingly. It seemed that the matter had been resolved temporarily, but my heart was still full of worries. How could Mike's pupils change color? I told Mindy to go to kindergarten to pick up Lily from school, and then took Mike back to the car. "Mike, tell Mommy, when did you find out that your eyes are changing color?" I took Mike's hand, feeling so remorseful I should have found out. Mike still kept his head down, clenching his small fist and not answering. I felt so bad for my boy. It was all my fault. If my kids were born in a werewolf pack like other werewolf kids, they would be exposed to a different world from childhood. But because I was kicked out of the house, My children are now treated as monsters in the human world. I put my arm around Mike, but he looked up at me with a determined expression and asked with a steady tone, "Mommy, I'm not like everyone else, right?" I was shocked by Mike's question. Did he find out that he was not an ordinary person? I opened my mouth, but didn't know how to answer the question. At this time, Athan Buffay suddenly spoke. "Do you wish you were like everyone else?" Athan Buffay asked with a smile, looking at Mike with probing and encouraging eyes, as if he was expecting something. Mike looked at Athan Buffay, was silent for a moment, and replied firmly, "No, I want to be stronger than them, because then I can protect Mommy and Lily." "Mike," I looked at my 5-year-old son, surprised and moved by his answer. Athan Buffay nodded and looked at Mike admiringly. "Good, because you're definitely stronger than them." "So what about you?" Mike demanded, straightening up to look at Athan Buffay. "We have the same green eyes, so who is stronger, you or me?" I can't imagine these courageous words coming from my 5-year-old son, and I was even more surprised that he recognized Athan Buffay as one of his kind. I never even told Mike that he was actually a werewolf. But he faced an adult alpha with a strong aura without fear and asked him which of the two was stronger. Athan Buffay's smile deepened. He looked at me, then back at Mike and replied, "Maybe you should listen to your mommy telling you about your background before I answer that question." "I'm a wolf, right?" Mike's childish voice blocked what I was about to say. "My baby," I took his hand, and I felt my palms keep sweating from shock. "How did you know? How did you find out?" "You can understand a wolf howl, can't you, Mike?" Athan didn't seem shocked, but his face was full of sighs. "I didn't expect you to be like me." I was been completely stunned. Could it be that there are werewolves that can communicate with wolves? I was about to ask more, but Athan Buffay stopped me with a gesture. "It's not safe here. Let's take Mike back to the apartment first, and we'll talk about the rest later." I almost forgot that there are people looking for me and Athan outside now. I immediately started the car and drove back to the apartment. Mike was so exhausted by the day's events that he fell asleep almost as soon as he entered my room. I looked at his sleeping face, which was like an angel to me, touched his cheek lightly, and then exited the room. "Catherine, you don't have to worry too much," Athan Buffay said to me as he sat in the living room waiting for me. And when I was ready, he said to me, "Mike didn't have his wolf, he just awakened werewolf hearing, an innate ability that very few werewolves carry." Afterwards, Athan Buffay explained to me in detail the reasons for all this. Simply put, every werewolf is a werewolf because we all carry a certain percentage of wolf blood, and the purer the wolf bloodline in the body, the stronger the werewolf, and the greater the probability of having a wolf as an adult. Werewolf hearing is a more special ability than having a wolf, which almost only appeared in the childhood of the purest male werewolf. Because of this, they are also easily influenced by wolves, showing a more bloodthirsty and cruel side than ordinary werewolves. "You just said Mike was the same as you. Did you also awaken this ability when you were young?" I asked. Athan Buffay nodded. "That's right, so we have to do some necessary training for Mike from now on to help him master this ability. His pupils are discolored because he is more influenced by wolf blood." Athan Buffay nodded. Buffay said, his face turned seriously, "You have to be prepared. Mike is likely to have his own wolf like me at a young age." When it was about dinner time, I woke Mike up. He rubbed his eyes and stretched out his hand to hug me, no different from usual. But when I thought back to what Athan Buffay said, I can't help but think about that man, Mike and Lily's biological father. I remember him as an alpha, and I didn't expect his blood to be so pure. It's just that now we are not living in a werewolf pack, but in a human society. I really don't know if this is a good thing for Mike. "Mike, when did you first hear wolf howl?" Athan Buffay asked during dinner. "I was sleeping one night and saw a wolf in my dream. He told me I was a wolf too," Mike said. "When I woke up, my eyes were gold. I was afraid of scaring Lily, so I changed the eye color back." "You can control the color of your eyes?" What happened today is beyond my common sense. I looked at Athan Buffay, but he looked at Mike with interest and asked, "So you are saying that you changed your pupil color to scare the boy named Timmy on purpose?" Mike pouted, but he didn't deny it. No wonder Mike refused to apologize in the hospital. No wonder the kid called him a monster. I took Mike's hand and told him seriously, "Mike, no matter whatever happens, you can't change the color of your pupils to scare others in front of anyone in the future. Do you understand?" "Why?" Mike looked at me with a look of incomprehension. "But I'm better than them. Shouldn't they be afraid of us?" I suddenly became anxious. How could he have such an idea? Could it be the wolf influence that Athan Buffay said? Because with great power comes great responsibility, Athan Buffay's deep voice sounded. The dark green color in his pupils started fading and replaced by a hint of golden color. In an instant, Athan Buffay unleashed his aura. The air in the whole room seemed to freeze. He moved his upper body closer toward Mike, who was already stunned by such great aura. The gold in Athan Buffay's eyes dazzled. "You said you wanted to protect your family," he said. "Then you need to control your power. That's your first lesson." Mike's little face was full of surprise. He nodded solemnly. It was his surrender to absolute power. "I'll see you at home, Mommy." Mike kissed on my cheek and waved at Athan, his bright face like a blooming flower. I smiled and looked at my little boy and said goodbye to him. I stared at his back until he walked in and closed the door, and I couldn't calm down for a long time. My 5-year-old son already showed sign of werewolf, and how long can I keep the peaceful and normal life for him until his first shift? Thinking of that, I couldn't help but frown. Suddenly, a cold finger touched my brow, and I looked up and met Athan's eyes. "Don't worry, Catherine," his smile was warm and gentle. "Mike will be fine. I won't let anything happen to him." I nodded. Somehow his words comforted me, and perhaps it was because he was such a strong werewolf, which made me feel safe. Looking at his beautiful dark eyes, a weird feeling took over my brain, which was like my heart skipped a beat, and all I could see was Athan's eyes. I approached him unconsciously, and I could feel his hot gaze on me. At that moment, there seemed to be hundreds of butterflies flapping their wings in my chest, as if he and I were the only ones left in this world. The distance between us getting shorter, I could almost feel his warm breath, and as our lips got closer, I closed my eyes. "Mummy!" Lily's voice dragged me back into reality. I stepped back in panic and turned to her. Lily ran into my arms, pulling my collar and forcing me to bow down, and left a kiss on my cheek. "I love you, Mummy," she put on a big smile and said to me, then ran back to the house. Lily's presence caught me off guard, and I quietly looked up at Athan Buffay, who had already turned his back on me, but I still saw that his ears and neck were all red. Athan Buffay didn't speak again until I got back to the apartment, and there were times when I wanted to say something to break the silence, but felt a little irritated. Maybe he didn't want to kiss me at all, or maybe he was embarrassed by me. I was confused and a little hurt too. It's not like he didn't force to kiss me several times already. Why was he acting so weird today? It was near evening. I cooked some food while Athan Buffay was sitting in his room silently. "Are you going to eat, or are you going to act like that and starve yourself?" I knocked on his door and said to him. I had to admit that I felt wronged. Athan stood up and sat by the table. He picked up the cutlery and still said nothing. An unknown flame of anger burning in my chest, I took his fork away from his hand and looked at him. "Athan Buffay, are you embarrassing me?" He looked up at me with surprise on his face. "What are you talking about?" "Then what is it? We were about to kiss, and now you are treating me like I don't exist. Is this a game for you? Is it fun you see me like that?" I shouted. My sight blurred, perhaps by my tears. I remembered everything I had been through with the man in front of me, and I knew that I already fell for him when I didn't notice. He was shocked by my words. Why wouldn't he? He was the great Athan Buffay, and who am I to question him? A tear fell down my cheek. I stretched the corner of my lips and shook my head, then I turned and walked back to my room. What's the meaning of love? After all, it's all a lost cause. Suddenly, a strong arm wrapped my waist and lifted me up. Athan Buffay swung me into his arm before I could react. He carried me into my room, throwed me on my bed, and pressed his whole body on me, with my hands lifted above my head and gripped by his hand. We were so close to each other that I could feel his heavy breath. "Athan, he covered his lips on mine and stuck his tongue while I opened my mouth. The minty smell was all over my mouth, and the deep, wet kiss made my body hot. His hands started gradually moving on my body. Everywhere he touched, I trembled. It was amazing. I never knew I could be so nervous but happy at the same time. My tongue entangled with his, I closing my eyes, and I couldn't help let out moan. Then he suddenly stopped. My breath was messed up by him, and I got confused. I could certainly feel how hot my face was, as I was shy. Athan staring at me, his eyes turned red, his lips trembled like he was enduring something, and after a while he spoke. "I wish to do that every day, all the time, to you." I was stunned. What did he mean? "Catherine," he stroked my hair and my face, and his voice was low, full of temptation. "Tell me to stop now, and I will walk out that door." His voice was slightly shaking, but he stopped every movement and waited for my answer. "Go on," I whispered. "Don't stop. My name is Athan Buffay." As the eldest son of the Alpha of the Full Moon Pack, I had known my destiny since I was a child. My people were everything to me, and I needed to protect them and lead them. My father was a great leader, and he told me when I was very young that I was born with all the necessary abilities to be an alpha. I had my wolf when I was 11, and at 15, I was able to beat the adult deltas in the pack on my own in wolf form. But powerful abilities didn't just bring advantages. Since my wolf awakened, I had often endured violent and bloodthirsty urges that others couldn't imagine. I knew that was the pure werewolf blood in me. To prevent myself from becoming a beast that only knew how to kill, I did willpower training every day. Whenever I was in a state of extreme violence, I would lock myself up and fight the wolf in my body alone. When I was 27 years old, my father died of illness, and I inherited his place by hereditary. Technically, I wasn't an alpha yet. Although the alpha's status was generally hereditary, by the alpha's son becoming the new alpha after his adulthood and mate, I had never met my mate. Years of self-suppression made me unbearable for a marriage bound by a mate bond. Why the werewolf's life pursuit was to find their own mate. Why for werewolves, mate bond must surpass love. I did not accept such fate. Since I could suppress my wolf by willpower, so I could also find true love by myself. Therefore, I had never tried to find my mate, and I was determined not to marry anyone at will just for the sake of reproduction. Sometimes I thought, maybe I was born without my own mate, which was not a bad thing. I'd rather be single and lonely forever than marrying someone who only attracted me because of the stupid bond between us. Until that night, when I met her. The day I was given a powerful hallucinogenic drug, the woman who had given me tried to use it to get me out of control and mate with her. I felt hot and irritable, and the energy in my body seemed to have nowhere to release. But the moment the woman touched my body, I felt a physical nausea. I pushed her away and rushed out of the room. I ran without direction, shuttling through the trees. The night breeze didn't make me feel any better, and I felt dizzy and was just about to be swallowed up by a strange desire. Suddenly, I smelled a sweet smell like candy. The smell was looming, and I greedily inhaled, just wanting more. There was a small noise in the lavender flower field not far away. It was the smell of that person. In a trance, I heard my wolf's hoarse growl. "Athan, find her." My eyes had long blurred, and my body was dominated by desire. That smell, I wanted more, and I wanted all. I ran in my fastest speed, and within a few minutes, I locked her figure. Almost without hesitation, I grabbed the woman into my arms. Her body was so thin and soft that I could crush her almost instantly. The moment I got close to her, I thought of the forbidden fruit that Eve stole, and the irresistible temptation nearly made me lose consciousness. I held her in my arms, and her lips were sweeter than her scent. I couldn't wait to touch her body. I wanted to have all of her. "Athan, do you feel it? She is your mate. You were born to belong to each other." I murmured unconsciously, "My mate, my Luna." "No, I'm not." Her voice sounded so broken. I finally sobered up a little. I tried to suppress my desire and told myself no, I should not do this to a woman. I tried to stay awake, but my body wouldn't obey. I approached her unconsciously and kissed her. I realized desperately that I couldn't resist this bond from the depths of my soul. The night breeze blowing under the gentle moonlight, we united together. I hugged her contentedly, and at that moment, our soul blended together, and I was no longer alone. And since that night, the woman had disappeared. She seemed to be just a dream I had. In the past 5 years, I had returned to that place again and again to find her, but every time I returned disappointed. Sometimes I would laugh at myself. Maybe it was all just the effect of drugs, and she was not my mate at all. Maybe I've seen her long ago, but I didn't recognize her. So when I smelled that familiar scent again, I almost lost control. The woman's body was weak and did not look like a werewolf. She trembled slightly when she faced me, as if she was about to faint in fear, but her eyes looked so firm, which were the same as that night. I recognized her almost instantly, my mate. And that was the moment I truly understand. My life could only be complete with her company. I looked at her beautiful eyes, and I realized that she was all I had been waiting for. So if there is fate, then she is my fate. Catherine Green, my destined love. I looked for her for 5 years, but the first thing she said to me when we met again was asking me to save her husband. How could she be with other men? I was her mate. I couldn't believe that she didn't remember me at all, and she had no feelings for me. Her scent fascinated me, and I knew it was something that only mates could smell. However, all these fetters were one-sided, and she never felt that I was special to her. Jealousy almost made me lose my mind, so I kissed her roughly, and I wanted to mark her immediately. Her lips were soft and bouncy. Her warm breath surrounded me, and I said to myself, she was mine, she was mine. But I couldn't do that to her again. All I could remember was that I left the room in daze, and her eyes were so innocent and pure. For the first time in my life, I was lost. I did a detailed background check on her, which revealed that her husband was Jack Harden, and she moved to the Diamond City 5 years ago. For the first year, she did lots of part-time jobs and was living in an old bachelor apartment. By then, she was still single, and about 8 months after, she gave birth to twins, Mike and Lily. I looked at the document in my hand, and the name Jack Harden appeared here. She was actually pregnant with his child, and actually formed a family with an ordinary human. I almost wanted to rip the files in my hand to shreds. However, as I continued to read the material, I became more and more puzzled. Catherine got married with Jack Harden about 4 years ago, right after she gave birth. Jack Harden was just an ordinary human, and if you would like to add some features to him, he was a well-known young entrepreneur with over 10 million assets. With a privileged family background, he embraced the family business as soon as he graduated from college, and in just a few years, he managed to grow the small business into a public company with multinational financing. This achievement was very successful among humans, but his marriage to Catherine was very low-key, and they did not hold the wedding or inform his family. Did they get married just for the kids? I immediately started investigating Catherine's pack, only to find out that she moved to Diamond City because she was kicked out of her pack by her father, and this happened 2 months after my night with her. All of a sudden, lightning flashed in my head, and I just felt dizzy. Could it be, was I the father of her children? That night 5 years ago, she had our baby. Since that day, I could no longer control the guilt and regret in my heart. I just hoped she could stay by my side. So I kept her with me on the pretext of helping her save her husband. I wanted the best for her. I personally decorated her bedroom for her. After she fell asleep, I stood at her door like a sick person just so that I could hear her steady breathing. At that moment, I felt the joy of what was lost and found. I swore in my heart that I would never let her hurt again. There were times when I was so attracted to the smell on her that I couldn't help kissing and stroking her. I also secretly went to the kindergarten to look at the 2 children of mine. On first sight, I was certain that they were mine. They were so cute and happy. I wanted to go over there and hug them and tell them that I was their father. But I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. It wasn't until I was assassinated multiple times that I realized that Catherine wasn't safe around me. I found a reason to send her away, and I didn't expect that she would come back for me. Did this mean that she also cared about me? I thought she must have noticed it too, because the attraction of mates to each other was mutual. My wolf affected her wolf too, and she would know one day that I was the one who hurt her 5 years ago. I never feared anything, not even death, but I couldn't imagine losing her in my life again. So when she asked me about if it was me 5 years ago, I chose to deny it. Her relaxed expression was like a needle stuck in my heart, but I was intoxicated by the enthusiasm she unleashed on me. We had our first proper kiss, and I knew she liked it. That night, she told me to stay. She finally accepted me. I tried my best to be gentle and to please her, and I made her tremble and moan many times. I wished that this could erase that bad memory she had about our actual first night. I wished that she would fall in love with me, and she would one day realize that I was her destined mate. "I love you, Catherine." I stroked her hair after she fell asleep and whispered to her ear. If only the time could freeze at this moment, I would treat everything I had for it. "Don't stop," I said to Athan. I bet my face was red, probably my neck too. I'd never said something like this before. As he let go of my hands, looking into my eyes, I saw desire from the deep of his green eyes. He leaned down, the tips of our noses almost touching, and his fingers ran softly across my cheek, resting on my chin. I just felt as if my whole body had been electrocuted, and I couldn't control the trembling. The corners of his mouth twitched, and then he leaned in and kissed my lips lightly. "Do you know what's about to happen, Catherine?" His voice was hoarse. I think I was under his spell. Looking at his green eyes, I nodded and shook my head. I knew, also I didn't know. I didn't have any experience, and even didn't know where to put my hands. At this time, he smiled lightly. "Whenever you show this expression, I feel that you are seducing me." I was instantly shy and overwhelmed. His words made my heart beat faster, and I couldn't help covering my face with my hands to avoid looking at him. But I felt his warm lips lightly press on the back of my hand, and then he gently took my hand away and kissed me. The kiss was no longer gentle. He aggressively invaded my mouth and sucked my tongue. His hands ran wildly around my body, and his fingers slid down my neck, and my clothes were ripped apart by him. He left my lips and bit my neck, and I felt hot. He moved down my neck, licking my collarbone lightly, and I bit my lower lip, his action making me feel itchy. So I reached out and nudged his shoulder, but he held my wrist in the air as if anticipating my move, and the next second, he put his other hand between my legs. I was so ashamed. His head rested on my chest. I couldn't help moaning out any longer, and his breathing got worse. He ripped my panties and put his fingers inside me, and I was going crazy. "Athan." I muttered his name, only to hear his chuckle. "Is this unbearable?" He stopped what he was doing, and by this time I had already been stripped naked by him. He sat up with a smile and stripped naked. His burly body glowed like a Greek god in the light, and his big hands gently lifted my hip and put a pillow under it, "So it'll be easier for you." My knees felt sore when he fully entered my body, and the pleasure was something I had never felt in my life. He held me tightly and went faster and faster. For a while I lost my sanity. I was soaked into desire. I felt sore and I felt ache. But I loved it. It was amazing. I couldn't get enough of him. I was tired and sore, but I didn't care. I didn't want to sleep. I wanted the ache. I wanted him in me all the time. His weight on top of me, sweat dripped down his chin and fell on my chest. He carried me to the bathroom and gently scrubbed me. I was so tormented by him that I had no strength, so I could only rely on him and let him help me. By the time we got back to bed, I was too tired to open my eyes. He kissed my forehead, nose, and lips and said goodnight to me. The mint smell on his body was getting stronger and stronger, and it seemed that it also infected me. The smell made me feel so at ease. Then I fell asleep in Athan's arms. I had a dream in which I was in a forest and there was a wolf in front of me, whose hair was as white as snow, eyes shining like diamonds, slowly walking toward me, and for some reason I didn't move, as I wasn't scared. "Who are you?" I asked, but part of me already knew the answer. I reached my hand to the wolf's raised chin. She was gorgeous, with her fur shining under the moonlight. "I am you, Catherine," she waved her tail and spoke, "and you are me." Suddenly, a soft silver light surrounded us, and we were circled inside. The wolf leaning forward, she spoke again. "It's about time, Catherine. Wake up." The next second, the wolf walked right into me, and we became one. I looked up and saw the moon. With an excitement surging in my heart, I started running, and I was fast. I jumped over the river, ran up the cliff, and the joyful feeling made me howl. I was a wolf. I suddenly opened my eyes. She went in me. A light flashed in my mind. Was that my wolf? Because of the explosion at Athan Buffay's company and the disappearance of the CEO Anne, the entire city was almost in a state of panic. People were afraid it was a terrorist act. So when I went to the supermarket, there were very few people in the store. Two middle-aged women were discussing the bombing while picking vegetables. I heard that the CEO of that security company got into trouble and may have fled abroad now. Maybe he's dead. My husband was around there when it happened. He said the explosion was so loud and it was almost like a fireball and no normal person could escape, unless he wasn't human. I curled the corners of my mouth and shook my head. They were right, that Athan wasn't actually human. When I woke up this morning, he had left the apartment. Maybe our relationship was close enough, plus I didn't belong to any pack, so I could use MindLink to contact him. Sorry, there are things that need to be dealt with. It's not convenient for me to be on the street during the day now, because I shall not be recognized, so I have to leave in the early morning. His tone was full of apology. That's all right, I replied. Are you coming back for dinner tonight? Unexpectedly, he smiled lowly, and his voice was very pleasant. It's like we are a family, and my wife is rushing me home. I like it. I blushed. He was right, and now that we lived under the same roof, it was like we were just a normal family. I sighed, only if that was true. I made myself some simple lunch and headed to the hospital. And as so many things happened yesterday, I didn't have the chance to visit Jack. When I got to the door of his ward, through the glass window, I saw Jack was looking at something, with his eyes being soft and a little nostalgic. And it didn't look like he was looking at an ordinary company business contract at all. I pushed the door and went in. Why are you working again? Jack seemed to be startled by me and hurriedly tucked the contract in his hand under the pillow. You're here. I wasn't working. I was just bored and decided to read something. He gave me a gentle smile. You can't just look at anything. You should have a good rest now and get ready for the surgery. I walked in and tidied up his nightstand. There were some fruits that went bad. He's always like that, forgetting to rest whenever he had work to do. Okay, I'll listen to you and be an obedient husband. He poked my arm and watched my face. I couldn't keep the serious face and laughed with him. When I saw his warm smile, I was moved. How are you feeling lately? Have you eaten yet? I asked, tidying up his clothes for him. Jack nodded and smiled. Everything is fine recently. Oh, except that I can't eat solid food, so I had to eat some liquid food. However, the doctor will give me nutrient solution every day, so I feel that my body is more energetic than before. He always described very painful things with great ease, but only I knew how many days and nights he endured the huge pain and almost collapsed. I felt bad for Jack, but I knew that he was a strong person, only that he didn't like to show his weakness, so whenever he was suffering, I would sit beside him and hold his hand as support. That was the least I could do as his family. At this moment, Jack suddenly took my hand. Catherine, if I don't make it, promise me you will live a good life and be happy. His serious look made me feel distressed. I took his hand back and said loudly, How could that be? Athan is already preparing for your surgery, and you'll be fine. Don't forget, Mike and Lily are looking forward to travel with you when you recover and leave the hospital. Athan? He smiled, but his eyes looked away. I remember you used to call him by his full name. It seems that you have become very close. Jack's words reminded me of how I met Athan until now, and then I realized that, before I knew it, he had become the closest person to me. Facing Jack's question, I didn't know how to answer him for a while. After a few seconds, I blushed and whispered, We are now relatively close. Jack looked at me again. His eyes were full of tenderness. Kath, you don't need to be careful in front of me. You can tell me anything. I was about to speak, but he interrupted. But before that, Catherine, I have to tell you something about Athan Buffay. I don't want you to have too much interaction with him, because this man is too dangerous. I've got someone to investigate him, and they didn't find anything. I think he's hiding a lot of secrets. I looked at Jack's serious expression and was a little shocked. Did Jack find out Athan's werewolf identity? Did he know that I was a werewolf too? I was a little overwhelmed, and a familiar deep voice sounded behind me. Since it's about me, I hope you don't mind if I listen to it too. Athan Buffay? Why was he here? Seeing Athan appeared in the ward, Jack's expression turned surprised, but calmed down quickly. I turned to look at Athan Buffay and asked, Athan, what are you doing here? Athan Buffay smiled at me. Remember I told you that I was going to check my body and get ready for the surgery? He turned to look at Jack. But I didn't expect that the person who is receiving my donation has a prejudice against me. The atmosphere in the room changed, and Jack put away his warm smile, frowned and stared at Athan, looking a little angry. Mr. Buffay, my apologies, but shouldn't you knock on the door first? The weird atmosphere made me feel extremely embarrassed. I took Athan Buffay's wrist and walked to Jack to the bed, put on a smile and said, It's nice that you finally meet. Let me introduce Athan, Jack. Honesty, I wish I could just walk away, so I didn't have to bear with the weird vibe. Both Jack and Athan kept silence for a few seconds, they staring at each other with tension. I felt a little anxious and was worried that Athan would hurt Jack, so I took Athan's arm and said, Jack needs some rest. Let's go and we can come back visit him another day. But Athan Buffay didn't move at all, as he didn't want to leave with me. Then Jack turned his head and smiled at me. Catherine, it's okay. I have something to say to Mr. Buffay myself anyways. Can you go get me some water? My bottle is empty. Athan Buffay turned to me and nodded. He is right. You should go get some water for him. I was speechless. These two obviously wanted me to leave the room. Fine, but behave, both of you. I gritted my teeth and said to them, Talk like grown-ups. I tried to eavesdrop on the door, but I didn't hear anything, so I walked away. It didn't take me long to get the water, but when I walked back to the door of the ward, I saw Athan was already standing outside in the hallway. Are you done talking? That was fast. I walked up to him and asked. Athan nodded and said nothing. He looked at the water bottle in my hand and said to me, Go and give him the water first. I'll wait for you outside. I was a little confused about his attitude, but I went into the ward anyway. Jack smiled and took the water glass I handed him, patted the edge of the bed and motioned for me to sit down. What did you talk about? I sat down and asked. Nothing much, he yawned and said, I'm tired. I got up and tucked the quilt for him, but just when I was about to leave, Jack quickly grabbed my arm and pulled in his arms. He held me tight, but just after 2 seconds, he let go of me and laid down. Jack, I wanted to say something, but he waved his hand and closed his eyes. I was surprised by Jack's action. Part of me always knew that Jack had feelings for me, and I thought I liked him too. But that was until I met Athan. After I experienced so much with him, I realized that my feelings toward him was so special and pure. I cared about him and wanted to have a future with him, which was something I had never felt before. After I left Jack's ward, I went home with Athan. 20 minutes ago, at Jack's ward, Athan made sure that Catherine had left, and he turned back to face Jack. What did you want to say to me? Jack was silent for a while, then he stared at Athan for a few seconds and said, Are you a wolf too? Athan raised his eyebrows and he spoke with a smile. I'm impressed. How did you find out? Jack shrugged his shoulders. He knew all alone. He had seen several times when Catherine's eyes changed color, but for some reason she never realized it. He did lots of researches on werewolves and concluded that she was one, but he didn't want to reveal her identity. He was willing to wait for her to tell him herself. Life had been hard for her, Athan, he sighed. I always wished that I could do more for her, and I never cared if she's a wolf or human. To me, she's the woman I love, and it's that simple. He took out the files he hid under his pillow and passed it to Athan. This is my will. Athan took a look at the papers, and he had a surprised look on his face. You are leaving all your assets to Catherine? Jack nodded. My parents passed away when I was little, and my uncle had moved abroad after he transferred the company under my name. Catherine and the kids are my only family left in this world, so I don't want you to take them away from me. Athan put away the document and looked at Jack suspiciously. What do you mean? I mean, Jack said, I will not take your bone marrow, but before I die, I need to make sure that you leave Catherine and her kids alone. We went back to the apartment together before dark, and on the way home, Athan was a little silent. I guess it had something to do with his previous conversation with Jack, but I didn't ask him. I knew Jack well, and since he was deliberately letting me out of the room, he didn't want me to know what he said to Athan, and I respected that. I turned my head to look at the scenery outside the car window. Dusk approaching, the sun setting westward, and the clouds above the horizon dyed layer by layer of different colors, which was like a perfect picture. I remembered the dusk in my hometown, where there were no tall buildings, so the horizon was very low, and I could clearly see the whole picture of the sun from touching the line to disappearing without a trace. Over the years, that scene was still an irreplaceable, beautiful picture in my heart, while that place was no longer my home. Athan's big hand grabbed mine lightly, and I turned to meet his dark green eyes, the dim twilight gilding his face, and he smiled and turned his head to look straight ahead. My heart calmed down again. For some reason, he always seemed to be able to feel my emotions immediately, and often a look or a smile from him could comfort me. Thinking of this, I couldn't help feeling a little shy. I lowered my head and laughed. My gloomy mood improved. When we got back to the apartment, Marcus was already waiting outside the door. Seeing us coming out of the elevator, he bowed and said to Athan, "Mr. Buffay, we have caught the spy of David Hunter's." Athan signed Marcus to go on and opened the door. Marcus entered the room with us. He was very careful, and for the past few days, he didn't make any move, so I set him up. I thought that they must want to know your location, so I decided to give them a location. I stayed in your room for 2 nights and told everyone to not get close to that floor. Then I set up cameras and left the building on the 3rd morning, and only one person obeyed my order and sneaked in. Athan asked, "Who was it?" Marcus's expression became a little angry. "It's Leo Ford, 2nd Class Delta, the son of James Ford." Athan nodded, and I could feel his mood change. I remember his father died on the battle back then when my father was the Alpha, and left him with his mother who was ill. Marcus stepped up and raised his voice. "How could he do that to you, to our pack? You brought him here, gave him a better life, but he betrayed you." Athan instead was very calm. He stood up and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, in his voice deep, saying, "Good work, Marcus." Then he turned to me, his smile was gentle. "Catherine, I need to go back and deal with this. Can you wait for me here?" Athan looked as calm as before, but I knew that he was upset. It was actually kind of magical that after our night together I could easily sense his mood. I shook my head and smiled at him. "I'm coming with you." He looked a little surprised, but then he became happy. "You want to go with me?" "Yeah," I laughed, "unless you don't want my company." Athan finally smiled. He held my hand and said, "It's my pleasure, let's go." 20 minutes after, we went back to the pack gym. The spy Leo was tied up, and when he saw us walk in, his eyes were full of fear and shock. He looked at Athan, who was healthy, and said in horror, You're okay, how?" "David said the bomb could at least blow up one of your legs." "So it was David Hunter. What did he promise you?" Athan sat down in front of Leo and asked. "A better life, of course," Leo laughed. "With you and Alpha, I would never have a chance to be a team lead, but David promised the position of his Gamma." Leo's voice is raised and his expression became excited. His eyes were wide open with madness. Marcus's body was shaking from anger, and I could tell that Leo's words angered him. Just then, Athan laughed out loud as he just heard something hilarious. He shook his head and looked at Leo. "I would probably pick you too if I were David, because you are too naive." Leo stared at Athan with hatreds. "Bullshit! You are just trying to break me." Athan stood up. He looked down at the man in front. Coldness filled his eyes. "No Alpha would ever use a traitor. When you kill me, your end will only be death. And you are wrong. I don't need to break you because you are useless. I bet David didn't even contact you after the explosion. That's why you risked everything to find out my condition, because you wanted him to trust you again. You are just a piece of chess, my friend." Before we left the room, I looked back at Leo, who sat on the chair like he had finally understood the reality. Before the door closed, he roared loudly, full of sadness and regret. And then a gunshot sounded. Athan's hand squeezed mine, but the next second he returned to normal. Suddenly I felt the heavy burden he had as a leader. Leo's death silenced both Athan and Marcus, and I could relate with them so much. Growing up, I couldn't count the number of times I was betrayed and abandoned by my family, and each one broke my heart. I knew Athan was not a ruthless leader. He loved his pack, so executing Leo was a painful decision for him. I tightened his hand, hoping to give him some strength. At this time, Marcus suddenly thought of something, and he said, "Besides Leo, there is another person locked here, Thana Green." Athan turned his head to look at me, with a rare look of cruelty in his eyes. "I can kill her directly for you." "No," I shook my head. "I want to see her alone." Thana was held in a corner office, and Marcus said she had been asking to see Athan since she was caught, and that she had a secret to tell him about me. I knew roughly what she was trying to say. It was just that I was a slut, I'd gotten kids, and I was just an omega without a pack or something. I pushed open the door and entered the room. She was tied to a chair, her reddish-brown hair loose. Hearing the door open, her shoulders twitched, but she didn't look up. I walked up to her and tapped the table lightly. "I told you, I will only talk to Athan Buffay." She raised head, stopped talking, and her face twisted when she saw me. She let out a burst of wolf howls, her eyes reddened, and her sharp fangs were exposed. However, the rope that bound her was specially made, and ordinary werewolves couldn't break free at all. She went almost insane. Her body kept swooping forward, trying to break free. She looked at me with resentment and screamed, "I'm gonna kill you, bitch!" "If I were you, I'd stop struggling," I said calmly, looking down at her. "You're just hurting yourself." She finally stopped slowly, but her eyes were still blood red. She snorted coldly and said, "What are you doing here, showing off that you win?" I didn't respond to her provocation, and I asked, "You wanted to see Athan?" "Yes. Of course I want to see him, and I will tell him the truth about you." "You are a whore," she screamed. I laughed when she said whore. After so many years, she hasn't changed at all. "Save yourself some trouble, Thana. He won't see you." Thana sneered at me. "I don't care what kind of lie you told him, but it won't last long. You don't even have a wolf. Do you actually dream of being his wife one day? He is just playing with you, just like when my father played your slutty mother." I didn't react at her words, as I had heard something similar for so many years that it barely hurt me anymore. She was irritated by my calm reaction, and she screamed to me, "I hate you! I hate you! Catherine, I want you dead!" "That is the one thing I'm curious about," I asked her. "Why do you still hate me so much after you kicked me out of the family?" "Because you took everything from me. Because after you left, Father regretted of what he did, and he hated my mom for that. He was disappointed at me because I wasn't good enough to be a she-wolf Delta. It's all your fault. All your fault." I was almost amused by her. Some people were so comfortable at putting their mistakes on others. She bullied me, lied to me, left me in the woods to die, and kicked me out of my family, and now she was blaming everything on me. I thought that at least after I was gone, you would be the only pride of our father, and maybe one day you will feel bad for what you did to me. I stared at her. "But looks like you will always be a selfish bitch like your mom." "Fuck you." She tried to spit on me, but I avoided it, which made her furious. "You should burn in the hell, you filthy bitch," she screamed in a sharp voice, but I was tired of our conversation and about to leave. Just then, Thana's tone became vicious. She said, "I should have told Mother to drug you with poison instead of inhibitory drugs." I stunned. Inhibitory drugs? What was she talking about? I turned to Thana in shock, and she continued with a sneer. "Have you never wondered why you've never had a wolf? Because you don't deserve it. If you have a wolf, then what's so special about me? My mother wouldn't allow a bastard that father had with another woman to block my future." For a split second, I recalled a morning many years ago, when my mother had just died, and my stepmother still maintained a fake kindness to me. I had a dream that night. A wolf was talking to me in my dream. When I woke up, I anxiously asked my stepmother if that meant that I was about to have a wolf, but she told me it was just a dream. And I hadn't dreamed of wolves since then. It all made sense now. She used drugs to suppress the werewolf gene in me, and that explained why I never had wolf, and all the dreams I had been having lately. I gasped against the wall and breathed heavily, as the fact was so hard to take. How vicious! For the first time in my life, I had the urge to kill, and for the first half of my life, all I wanted was to have wolves, to be approved by my father. I used to be unable to sleep because of my incompetence and regret. I blamed myself for not being able to live up to my expectations and shamed for my family. Now I got it. Everything that happened to me, it was caused by Thana and her mom. They had ruined my life. My hands were shaking, anger taking over my brain, and my vision even blurred. I wanted revenge. I wanted to kill her. I tried to move forward, but I lost my balance and fell to the ground. My fingers lengthened and my bones began to rattle, and Thana looked at my change, screaming. Before I could react, there was a loud noise outside, and then the whole building began to shake violently. I was thrown to the ground by the shock, and by the time I got up again, I was back to normal. What happened to me just now? I looked at my hands, and nothing changed, as if everything was just an illusion. However, I had no time to recall, because the second explosion sounded immediately outside. Someone was attacking this building. I ran to the window to look down and saw a group of werewolves, some of whom even had machine guns. People in the front row were climbing up with ladders, and people in the back row were throwing grenades into the open windows. I didn't have time to care about Tana, so I rushed out the door and ran into Athan's arms. "Great, Catherine, you're not hurt." Athan breathed a sigh of relief. "What is happening?" I asked him. He looked furious. "It's David Hunter." Athan's voice was deep. "In order to kill me, he did not hesitate to break the rules that hot weapons are not allowed in battles between packs. We have to get out of here." "Mr. Buffay," Marcus ran up from downstairs and said in a hurry, "They've blocked every entrances. There is no way out." Before we could respond to Marcus, a grenade rolled into the room with the open door next to us, just meters away. I didn't have time to react. Suddenly Athan held me in his arms with his back to the direction of the explosion, and I just felt the air around me was as hot as it was going to burn. There was a muffled groan above my head, and I looked up and saw the fine beads of sweat on Athan's forehead. I quickly checked his back. "He's hurt. We need to move him to the medical." Marcus shouted to me. Just then, a sharp scream sounded inside the room. It was Thana. I hesitated for a second and left Athan with Marcus. I rushed inside the room and quickly untied Thana. "Run! They are trying to blow up this building," I shouted at her. Thana's face was confused. "Why are you helping me? Don't you want me dead?" I shook my head. "I want you dead, but now right now, not like this. Now leave, before you get fried by the bombs." I rushed out the room and walked down to the basement with Marcus and Athan. Before we entered the secret underpass, Marcus stopped. "I can't go in with you. I need to go get help. All our people are not far away," he said. "But it's so dangerous. How could you get out?" I tried to grab his arm, but he stepped back, his eyes full of determination. "Take care of Mr. Buffay, Catherine, and I will come back for you." "It's okay. Marcus knows this building better than anyone. He will find a way out." Athan held my hand, and his hand was cold and his voice was shaken. Us wolves hated fire, and we were used to cold and dark. I could only imagine how much pain he was in. I quickly helped Athan walk in the room. I could hear him inhaling constantly because of the pain. "In there," he pointed to a room down the hall. "You need to go and open the door with passcode. I'm in too much pain, so I will wait for you here." I didn't doubt anything, and I entered the passcode as he said. Suddenly, an iron fence fell from the ceiling, and I was trapped in there. Athan straightened his body and stood outside the fence, and I realized what he was doing. "No, Athan, let me out!" I kept shaking the fence, but it didn't move at all. "I'm sorry, Catherine, but I need you to be safe." Athan smiled at me, but I saw sadness in his eyes. "I wish that we have more chances together, but you are always in danger because of me." "No, I choose to be with you," I corrected him, "and I don't regret it. Now let me go." Athan shook his head. "I can't. You are too important to me. I swore to myself I will never put you in danger." He took a step back. "If I don't come back for you, Marcus will come and let you out." "No, Athan, please don't leave me here." Tears gradually filling his eyes, his smile was gentle. "I love you, Catherine. From the moment I met you, please remember that." As his step faded away, I slid to the ground and tears ran down my cheek. The entire basement trembled violently due to the loud explosion, and some lights on the ceiling began to flicker, but I knew this place would not collapse because it was a purpose-reinforced secret room. Athan Buffay planned from the beginning to leave me here and fight alone. There was a small room behind me with enough food and water for a week and a bed. I watched where he left, tears blurring my vision. No, I couldn't let him face all this alone. I picked up a fallen brick from the ground and smashed it desperately at the iron fence. My hands were rubbed out with blood, but I couldn't feel the pain. I just wanted to go out. I'm going to find him. I threw my head away and slammed on the iron fence with both hands. If I bent it a little, I might be able to get out of the gap. However, I worked hard for a long time, but only shook the iron fence a little bit. I never wished I could shift into a wolf so much, for if I had my wolf, I would have so much power. I roared with all my strength. Finally, I slumped limply on the cold ground with my back against the iron fence, tears streaming down my cheeks to the ground. The sound of the explosion outside was getting quieter. I didn't know how Athan was at that time. I hated myself for being so useless. If he fell in love with a real female werewolf, instead of a useless omega like me, maybe he'd be in less danger. In the dim light, I closed my eyes in despair. Suddenly, there was a loud noise behind me. I turned around in a hurry and saw a big hole in the door lock position of the door at the entrance of the basement. I suddenly remembered what Athan said to me before leaving. Could it be Marcus here? Did that mean that Athan was in danger? "Marcus, I'm over here," I shouted to the person who just opened the door, and the lights were too dim that I couldn't see the person clearly. "There you are, my dear sister." A familiar voice sounded, and I saw Tana's face appeared in front of me. I immediately became nervous. How did she find this basement? Has David already taken over this place? "Where's Athan? What did you do to him?" I asked her out loud, but Tana's expression was a little surprised. "How would I know where Athan Buffay went?" She looked at the basement, and she clapped her hands. As expected of the alpha of the full moon pack, he was able to build such a huge pack base in human society. I didn't want to pay attention to her exaggerated tone, and just asked, "What do you mean? How did you find this place?" "By following you, of course." Thana finally looked at me with a smile. "It's just that I didn't expect that Athan Buffay would choose to put you in here. You are so important to him." Her tone was vaguely mocking and envious, but I didn't want to quarrel with her. "Thana, I don't have time for this. Can you please let me out? I need to go find him." "Why would I do that?" She raised her eyebrows and looked at me. "Do you think I would help you just because you saved me? You are too naive, Catherine." I exhaled slowly to calm myself down. I had to figure out a way to get Thana to help me out. If she leaves, no one could help me. "Thana, if you help me, I will owe you a favor." I looked into her eyes. "You would rather follow me than go back to David. It's because you don't trust him, am I right?" Thana's expression became hesitant, which meant I guessed right. I stared at her expression, waiting for her answer. After a long time, Thana asked, "Why would I want your favor?" "Well, you saw it yourself. Athan Buffay is in love with me." I smiled at her, try to make myself sound calm. "If you help me, I will make sure he spare your life, and the full moon pack will not seek revenge on you for what you did." She laughed dryly and retorted, "Who said Athan would win today? Maybe David has killed him by now. Then we will both be dead soon, because none of us is important enough for David to spare." I looked at Tana's face and I knew that she was really frightened by my words. Thana fell silent again. I held on to the iron fence and waited nervously. In fact, part of what I said was just my guess, and I don't know the real relationship between Thana and David, but at this moment I had to convince her. "Fine, I'll help you, but I need you to keep your promise." I let out a sigh of relief and stepped back. Thana's eyes turned with a loud roar. She bent the iron fence with her bare hands. Without hesitation, I ran out the door and went upstairs. It was now a battlefield outside, and David's werewolf warriors nearly surrounded the building, but for some reason they stopped moving forward. I took a closer look and found that their faces were full of surprise and fear. At this point, I heard a deafening roar that came from Athan Buffay. In my understanding, werewolves had limited fighting styles and forms, because even experienced adult werewolves would bleed and die. That was right, us werewolves were not immortals. However, the wolf I just saw looked so powerful that I felt the fear from the bottom of my heart. That was the first time I saw Athan in his wolf form. His figure was much larger than a regular werewolf. His entire body's fur was pure black, and the night-like fur color matched his golden pupils. When he opened his mouth, his sharp fangs shone dangerously color, which were as sharp as blades. I clutched at the frame of the window and almost forgot to breathe. I had seen in some old sources of pack, there were alphas that were strong enough on their own, and even without a pack, they were dangerously powerful. However, it was too late for me to think about it, because Athan attacked. That was definitely way faster than the speed of an ordinary werewolf. His speed was so fast that my eyes couldn't follow his move. His huge size didn't seem to affect his agility at all. In just a few seconds, the crowd of werewolf warriors in front of him were kicked down by him, and the werewolves in the back row rushed towards him immediately. But in a flash, he jumped in place and jumped to the top floor of the building. Super strength, super speed, and super agility. I suddenly felt relieved. If he was that powerful, maybe he could hold off until Marcus brought help. However, things didn't go as smoothly as I expected. David Hunter, who was originally standing at the back of the warrior, walked to the front. He stared at Athan in front of him and laughed slyly. "As expected, Athan Buffay, you are indeed stronger than I thought." His face was twisted and his voice changed. "Sometimes I'm really jealous of you for having such a powerful ability. It's just a pity that you have to die today." I was suddenly very nervous. What was David Hunter going to do? At this time, I saw a row of werewolves behind him with weapons similar to spears appearing. At the same time, rows of dark arrows were fired at Athan from a tree not far away. So vicious. No matter how powerful Athan was, it was impossible for him to escape attacks from every direction. I must find a way to help him. I went back indoors. There was a training room on the first floor, and there were a lot of physical training equipment. I packed all the dumbbell into my backpack, grabbed the drain hose from the fire hydrant, and rushed back to the window again. Outside the window, Delta's holding a spear was pressing against Athan from every direction, but he couldn't jump into the air because there were hidden arrows shooting at him at any time in the woods. I anchored the drain to the side of the window in alignment with David's deltas, then screwed the drain to max. The huge water pressure forced those werewolves to retreat, and their formation was finally messed up. I unzipped my pack and threw the dumbbells in the faces of the werewolves, who were knocked to the ground by me, and some of them tripped by each other. Finally, the emergency situation just now eased. Athan took this opportunity to jump up, grabbed a few spears on the opposite side and inserted them back, and then with a tragic cry ringing out, the smell of blood permeated. However, before I could relax, an arrow stabbed into my forearm, and the pain made me lose my strength for a moment. Immediately afterwards, countless arrows shot at the window where I was, and I had to duck into the room. But I was relieved, because that showed that I had attracted a lot of attacks for Athan. I breathed heavily, luckily, the wound being not deep. After a short break, I stood up and was able to go back to the window. By this time, the attack against me had stopped because they had to all focus on Athan. My eyes were fixed on him. He was so fast. All I could see was a black wolf flash back and forth, and wherever he stopped, bloodshed. However, I noticed something was wrong. They were trying to surround him. Although on the surface, Athan has always had the upper hand, in reality he had been forced into a corner. David's warriors surrounded him. There were too many of them. Even as powerful as Athan, he could no longer break through. "Kill him for me!" David Hunter's savage voice sounded, and I saw a werewolf raising its claws and pouncing on Athan. I couldn't watch it anymore. I reached out the window and was ready to jump. I couldn't watch him die and do nothing. Suddenly, I keenly felt the tremor of the ground. I turned around in amazement and saw a group of wolves with different coats roared and ran towards David Hunter's army. Our reinforcements arrived. Athan let out an imposing roar, and immediately, several of the werewolves who surrounded him were thrown into the air. Athan's black figure broke through their siege. He suddenly turned to look at me, and I looked into his golden eyes, those bloodthirsty and violent eyes that were now full of tenderness. There was warmth in my chest, and just when I was about to go out and find him, a cold dagger was placed on my neck. "I wouldn't move if I were you, sister." Thana stood behind me. Her left hand held the dagger against my neck, and her left hand grabbed my arm and made me not able to move. The sharp blade was so close to my neck, and I had to raise my jaw to leave a small gap from the dagger. "You don't have to do this, Thana." I turned my head a little so I could see her face and said, "David Hunter is a dangerous man. You shouldn't help him." But my words obviously didn't convince her, and only made her push the dagger on my neck more. "Shut up, sis. You don't know anything about David Hunter." Thana's voice was shaking, as if she had great fear mentioning his name. "He will kill me if I don't do anything useful, even if I'm his mate." "You are his mate?" I was shocked. How come he never cared at all about your life? My question made Thana laugh, because he has found more than one mate, and he wants us to compete with each other, and only the strongest will become his Luna. I almost couldn't believe her words. It was already rare to find a mate, and David found more than one and wanted these women to win for it, that sick bastard. "Thana, please." I didn't want to provoke her, so I said in a light voice, "You won't prove anything even if you hand me to him. He never cared about you." "Shut up, Catherine. You filthy bitch. I have to go to him all because of you." Her voice sharpened and she sounded mad. "How could you have everything? You have the most pretty face in the pack, and with you there, no one ever look at me. That's why when I finally kicked you out, I was so happy." "But how? How did you hook up with Athan Buffay? He is the strongest alpha alive. You don't even have a wolf, yet he still cares you enough to put you in that cell. And I got nothing. Even my own mate don't care about me. I hate you." I was shocked by her words. How could she blame everything on me? She was the one that bullied me, drugged me so that I won't have a wolf, and kicked me out of my own pack. And now she blamed me for everything. "No, Thana, it wasn't me that you should blame. It yourself. You never considered me your family. I was just a lowly bastard in your and your mother's eyes. You made me homeless and miserable, and now you still think that I live a better life than you? Wake up!" I shouted with anger. She was unbelievable. "I would probably listen to you if I never met David before he showed me what he is capable of," Thana said, her tone becoming sad. "I have no choice but obeying him, so you and your lover boy will have to die." She pushed me to the window, and not far away I saw a hint of smirk on David Hunter's face. "Athan Buffay, tell your men to stop fighting and get on their knees." Craziness shining in David's eyes. He was extremely excited. "Or I don't know what I would do to your pretty Omega. Maybe I will start with cutting off her hand." Athan was stunned. He looked back at me, and I shook my head firmly at him. Don't stop for me." Thana laughed lightly behind me. "Let's see how important you are to him." I stared at Athan with pleading in my eyes. "Please, don't make the wrong decision." Just then, Thana grabbed my right hand and forced me to raise it. She shook the blade and cut a wound on my wrist. I struggled, but all I got was a deeper cut. Athan saw what she did. I was panicked and shouted to him, "Athan, don't stop. Before I could finish my sentence, Thana slapped my face and a tooth fell off my mouth. The fighting gradually stopped. When I looked at Athan again, he already shifted back to human form. He raised his hand and all his deltas stopped. He was looking at me with the most gentle smile on his face. I saw his mouth moving. "It's okay," he said to me. And the next second, a sharp arrow shot through his right leg. I couldn't hold my tears anymore. Thana sneered to my ear, "Looks like he care about you more than you think, sis." David's people took me from Thana, and I saw David's evil smile on his face. Athan was right in front of me, but I couldn't reach to him because I was tied up. Cold sweats filled his forehead, and he was in lots of pain. David Hunter broke both of his legs and cut his chest open, tears filling my eyes, and I kept screaming, "Stop, please." However, my screaming only increased David's sick excitement, and he walked up to me, with Thana right beside him. David Hunter raised my chin and stroked his finger down my neck, whose voice was like a demon. "Don't worry, love. I will make sure you die together, after I have my fun with you." The next second, I was punched in the face and passed out. My head was heavy, and before I opened my eyes, I smelled damp and rotten. My arms were sore and I wanted to put them down. Only when I found that I couldn't, they were tied up. A pair of feet stood in front of me. I raised my head and saw David Hunter. He was holding a glass of wine, sipping it while seeing me wake up. Excitement filled his eyes when I looked at him, and he said, "Great, you are awake, my little beauty. Did you miss me?" I didn't want to say a word to him, so I just stared his face, wishing I could bite his throat and eat his flesh. David didn't mind my silence. In fact, he looked too happy to be mad. He reached his hand and smoothed my hair for me. Then he talked again. "You have such a beautiful face. Your sister is not even half as good as you." Then he took back his hand, chugged his wine. "Too bad you are going to die today with your lover Athan, or I wouldn't mind having both you and Thana serve me at the same time." "Shut your mouth, David," a low and deep voice sounded. It was Athan's voice. David had blocked my vision so I didn't see him. He was hanging on the ceiling across the room with his body soaked in blood, and I could still see the huge blood hole on both his knees. David shot them. His upper body was covered with lash marks, and a werewolf was standing beside him and whipped him. However, due to his extremely fast healing abilities, those welts soon began to heal. Every time when the wound just healed, it was torn open again, and the blood flowed non-stop. So vicious. I couldn't imagine how painful that would be, and Athan didn't even make a sound as he bared it. "You see, Catherine," David blocked my vision again. I had to look at him, and he was smiling at me. "Athan is no fun. He doesn't even make a sound when I torture him. I'm so bored, so I thought of a new game." He throwed his wine glass on the side and put his hand on my collar, then torn my clothes apart. I suddenly realized what he was going to do, and fear filled my heart. "Don't touch her." Athan growled with anger, and David Hunter turned to him. "Very well, tell me where is your secret base, or I will rape her in front of you." He walked up to Athan and said slowly, "I must admit I admire you as a leader. With one signal, all your people ran off and hided, and I didn't have time to catch anyone." Athan looked at David Hunter. Even badly injured and tied up, he didn't look scared at all, being the calm Athan Buffay still. He stretched the corner of his mouth and smiled. "The pack gym is my base. My people left me because I surrendered. They don't follow a weak leader, and that's our tradition. There isn't a secret base." David paused for a second, staring carefully at Athan's face, as if he was distinguishing whether he was lying. A few seconds passed. David stood up straight and walked toward me, and his tone became cold. "I don't trust you, Athan, but I don't mind play with your whore. I've been meaning to taste her since last time." David's face leaned closer to mine. It was so gross. His hand was still on my chest, and I leaned down and bit his fingers hard. He didn't expect me to suddenly attack him, so he didn't react for a while, and I certainly wouldn't let go of his fingers at all. I bit his finger with all my strength, and he groaned in pain. He stretched out his hand and kept slapping me on the head, and the whiplasher beside him started to beat me with the whip. But no matter what he did, I would bite hard and not let go. I could feel that the fascia of his fingers had been bitten off by me, and his fragile finger bones were cracked by me, and then accompanied by his screams, I bit off 2 of his knuckles. My mouth was full of fetid blood. I stared at David Hunter, who was about to faint, and chewed the 2 fingers in my mouth before spitting it out. Although he had healing ability, the 2 fingers that were bitten off couldn't be put back even after suture surgery. "You see, David," Athan, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. I looked at him and saw his smile. "My girl is a badass, so you really shouldn't look down on her. Sometimes she is tougher than me." "Atta girl," Athan said to me. I mind-linked him as soon as I woke up, and I told him not to worry when David ripped my clothes. Love is a strange thing, and with him by my side, I seemed to have endless strength and courage, and I didn't fear of anything. "Great, great," David shouted with fierce. He ripped my pants and panties and said to the man beside him, "Fuck her hard and make him watch. Leave me alone, or I'll bite off your face." I shouted and spitted on the man's face. He got startled by my action. Although David Hunter ordered him to rape me, but he wasn't dare to move up, not after seeing what I just did. David Hunter behind him was still bleeding. I could tell that he was in great pain. He was furious, with one hand pressing on his wound, and he swore to the man, "Do it or I will fucking kill you. Catherine, don't back down. He is scared." Athan said to me, "I need more time to heal. Stall them." I looked at him, and he was looking at me quietly. I slightly nodded and showed my most fierce to the man. I growled like a beast, and whenever the man tried to lay his hand on me, I showed my blood-stained fangs. Suddenly, I got slapped hard. David Hunter beat me with his good hand, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Don't think I don't know what you're up to. You are trying to stall for time, but too bad, no one will come to save you." Then he pointed to me and said to the subordinate beside him, "Gag this bitch's mouth and let me see what else she can do." A long stink cloth was roughly stuffed in my mouth. I stared at David Hunter with hatred, and he sneered, "Now take off her pants." I struggled desperately, but my hands and feet were tied, and there was absolutely no way to fight back. Just then, a weak voice sounded, "Let her go, and I will give you the information you need." David Hunter raised his eyebrows and turned around to look at Athan. He walked to him and squatted down and looked at him, and his tone was smug. "As I expected, you can't stand the torture of the woman watching you, right?" His fingers had stopped bleeding at this time, but from the sound of his breathing, I knew that he was still suffering from the pain, and the pain made him more and more crazy for some reason. David smiled lowly, and he shook his head and said to Athan, "But sorry, I changed my mind. I think it's more fun to torture her than to force you, and I'm going to show you today how I fuck your woman." Athan's eyes widened instantly, and I was in shock too. Had he seen through our plan? Yes, just now. Athan told me he got mind link from Marcus, and his people were nearby. Our plan was to give David Hunter the location of his base and lure him out. However, David Hunter was a sly man, and he was very careful. Just when Athan was about to speak, David Hunter picked up a brick and smashed it hard on Athan's head, causing Athan, who was already seriously injured, to faint. Then he threw the bricks away, turned to me and smiled sinisterly. Chills growing down my spine, I couldn't stop but shook. My pants were ripped and his hands stroked over my skin. I felt sick. I stared at him angrily, and he seemed to enjoy my anger. He kicked me on my belly and cut off the ropes on my feet and forced me to bend. Then he took off the cloth in my mouth and said with a low voice, "Now scream, my dear. I want Athan to hear loud and clear you when I fuck you." The men beside him grabbed my upper body so I wouldn't move, and David Hunter's filthy hand already reached to my panty. I felt despair and closed my eyes. Suddenly, a loud noise came in like a drum beat, and David Hunter's hand stopped. The expression on his face changed from surprise to anger. He grabbed my hair and forced me to look at him, then pinched my chin and asked, "Who is it? What did Athan Buffay do?" I smirked and said, "If you are so desperate to know, then you probably shouldn't knock him out." My words angered him even more, and his eyes soon turned. He raised his claw against my throat, but a shotgun on the floor interrupted him. He didn't have the time to kill me anymore and rushed out with his man. They were so flustered that they even forgot that I had been released. I rushed towards Athan, and my hands were still tied together, so I had to carefully run my fingers over his face. He was covered in blood, and his breathing sounded a little weak. I called his name eagerly, but I didn't hear his response. What a great scene. There was a round of applause behind me. "What is Thana here for?" I turned and looked at her silently, and she didn't mind my glare and continued, "Don't hate me too much, sis. I know you are mad at me for holding you hostage, but I just did what I need to do to survive." "Are you here to beg for forgiveness then?" I answered coldly. "Nope, I'm here to return the favor." Thana dropped a small bag to my feet. "This is for saving my life. Now we are even." I got down and looked at the things inside, a bottle of water and some herb medicine for injury. When I looked up again, she was already gone. "Athan, can you hear me? Please wake up." No response. It had been over 15 minutes, and I didn't know when David would come back. Tears ran down my cheek. I didn't know what to do. He looked like he was dying, and all I could do was sit there and watch. I leaned on him miserably and whispered to him, "Please, I'm not ready to lose you yet." Perhaps when you were in an extreme situation, you would magically get smarter. I suddenly recalled something I had seen when I was a little girl. I put my wrist to my mouth, biting through my veins and pointing the bleeding wound to Athan's mouth. It was many, many years ago. I once saw a dying werewolf warrior. The healer of our pack fed him wolf blood in an emergency situation and successfully woke him up. I stared at Athan and prayed to the moon goddess. A few seconds later, with a loud inhalation sound, Athan opened his eyes. I almost couldn't believe it worked. I kissed his cheek with joy, and it was great that I didn't lose him. "Catherine, are you okay? Did they?" he asked eagerly, but was interrupted by an intense cough. "I'm okay. They left because someone broke in. I think it's your people." I responded to him with a smile, but Athan didn't get excited by this news. He shook his head and said, "It won't be easy for them to break through David's army. I'm afraid he will kill us in a hurry and force my people to surrender." Before I told Marcus and my Gamma to wait for my command, but when I got knocked out, the Must panicked and directly invaded. It wasn't until then that I realized that David Hunter never intended to let us live until tomorrow, and the fact that Athan's pack came to rescue him would only make him kill us faster. "Come on, Athan, we don't have much time." Athan was using his teeth to break the rope tied to my wrist and told me that we were on our own. "Catherine, before he comes back, I need to tell you something." Athan's eyes were full of tenderness, and I stopped him. "Let me go first. I care about you, Athan, with all my heart." He was stunned, and soon his eyes were covered with tears, and his slightly parted lips trembled. "Catherine." I stroked his face and kissed his lips and nodded to him. "I'm with you, and I will always be with you." It was just that his expression became very complicated, and his eyes were intertwined with complicated emotions. After a while, he said again, "Catherine, there's something I haven't told you, that I've actually known you for a long time. Before he could finish his sentence, the door was opened with a forceful kick. David rushed into the cell like death. He grabbed me by the neck and threw me hard before his claws went down Athan's throat. I didn't care about the pain in my body, and I rushed up to grab his hand and didn't let him get close to Athan. "Fuck off!" David punched my face with his injured hand, but I stood still. At this moment, I was so glad I bit his finger off earlier, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to resist his attack. When his severely injured hand came at me here, I blocked that hand and stuck my fingernails into his wound. He screamed and finally let go of Athan. I hurriedly put Athan behind me and stared at him nervously. David stabilized his body and stared at Athan fiercely. "Stop struggling, you two must die today." Then he was about to rush over again, when Athan suddenly smiled softly and his voice was calm and low. "My people are about to break through, aren't they? So what? As long as I kill their alpha, they would become an army with no leader." David's eyes darkened, his voice cruel. I jumped toward him and tried to punch him in the face, but his speed way too fast than mine, he dodged. He was so much stronger than me. David Hunter's claws had stretched out to Athan's throat, and he could easily kill Athan as long as he took one step forward. At this moment, Athan, who had been hanging all the time, suddenly burst into a roar, and then he pulled so hard that he broke the rope that bound him. David was stunned for a moment, then reacted immediately, striking his claws toward Athan's throat. However, Athan easily grabbed his wrist and turned it out, followed by a sound of broken bones. David was thrown out. He got up and shouted unwillingly, "How is this possible? You are obviously dying." Without looking at him, Athan picked me up and walked towards the door. Then he glanced at the direction of David and said, "You're too weak." "Primordial werewolf?" I asked in shock. "Yes, I have the blood of a primordial wolf. That's why I'm bigger, faster, and heal faster." Athan looked at me. "Thanks to your blood, I gained my strength back even faster." I didn't know a lot about the primordial werewolf, who were more of a legend than a real species, but I had read myths about them and how powerful they could be. How big was an alpha werewolf? Usually around 7 feet tall, and they appeared to be more than 7 feet tall when standing on their hind legs, and almost completely wolf-like with glowing red eyes. However, as fierce as it sounded, they were nothing compared to the primordial werewolf. Primordial werewolves were the strongest and most powerful werewolves that ever existed, only second to the guardian wolves. The primordial werewolves were the second werewolves, as such were the most feared and most powerful of all in existence. In wolf form, they had the usual appearance of a timber wolf, but much, much larger than normal werewolves. In wolf form, they were taller than the average human male. Based on what I knew, no werewolf could match their power, and they possessed some abilities that normal werewolves didn't. Also, their abilities were at their peak during a full moon. They had super strength, super speed, heightened senses, super agility, healing, immortality, and more abilities that distinguished them from regular werewolves. I was shocked, but it also explained a lot. When he fought David's army, he was able to fight his whole pack. That was because he was meant to be stronger. "Mr. Buffay and Miss Catherine, are you okay?" Marcus's voice interrupted my thinking, and I tapped his arm to put me down. He had been holding me in his arms since the cell. Athan smiled at me, and he told Marcus, "Leave some people here to lock up David, and get me the healer. Catherine is injured." I wanted to say that I was fine, but obviously he didn't give me the chance. Although it was kind of nice not to have to walk in pain, the stares I got from Athan's deltas made me blush. I ended up hiding my face in his chest. Athan's healer was already waiting when we arrived at the villa. When I looked out the window, I could see that there was smoke coming from the pack gym, and it was from all the bombs earlier. Athan was injured badly, but he insisted for me to get treat first. He stayed beside me until I got treated and put in bed. The healer gave me a type of medicine that could put me into sleep, and before I fell asleep, Athan kissed me on the forehead. "Sweet dreams, Catherine," he smiled. I did dream, but it was quite a weird one. I saw my wolf again, and actually, if I wanted to describe it exactly, I saw not my wolf but myself, because I was the wolf, and the wolf was me, feeling like I was talking to my consciousness. "You are in danger, Catherine," she mumbled. "The past will hurt you and the future is blurred." "What do you mean? Why do I only see you in my dreams? Is it because I was drugged with inhibitor?" But she just shook her head and kept repeating, "You are in danger, and don't try to force yourself. You will get hurt, and be careful when full moon comes." A mist blocked my view, and she was gone. I ran anxiously looking for her, but found nothing. Suddenly it was pitch black, and when I opened my eyes again, I was still lying on my bed. My phone rang, and I must have been woken up by this. The caller was Jack's personal assistant, and I realized that I had disappeared for almost 2 days. Jack must be worried. "Miss Catherine, Mr. Harbour is very anxious that he can't reach you. He forcibly left the hospital this morning despite the doctor's dissuasion." I sat up from the bed all of a sudden. Jack's body was so weak. How could he leave his ward? I grabbed my jacket and ran out the door, slamming into Athan's chest. He grabbed my shoulder and asked me with a frown, "What's wrong?" When I was about to answer, I got a phone call from Jack. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Jack sounded relaxed, whose voice was as gentle as always. "I just went out for a walk, and everyone was making a big fuss about it." "I'm so sorry, Jack, I shouldn't have worried you." "Don't worry about it, Kath, as long as you are okay. I gotta hang up now. I'm about to enter the elevator." Jack hung up the phone. I knew he was covering his emotions, and I felt so bad about it. I sighed and looked up. Athan was still beside me. "Catherine, there's something that Jack told me not to show you, but I feel like I don't have the right to keep this from you." He took out a folder from his room and handed it to me. "This is Jack's will." My hands shook so hard that I almost couldn't hold the papers. The sentences on the papers shocked me. He actually planned to leave all his property to me and my 2 children. "After my death, I will give all of my property to my beloved Catherine Green." My tears dropped on the paper and wet it. Was he not going to take the bone marrow transplant? No, I needed to speak to him. "Catherine, wait." Athan stood in front of me and blocked me from leaving. "Athan, I don't have time right now. I need to go see him." I sighed and said to him, "I need to know what was he thinking. Why wouldn't he take the transplant?" But Athan didn't move. He put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me. "I understand, Catherine, but don't you think that you should respect his choice? You have done enough for him, but it is up to him whether he wants to accept it or not." "Done enough? No, he has done way more for me, and I treat Jack as my family." I pushed his shoulders, but he didn't move. Instead, he grabbed my hand and leaned toward me. "Catherine, what if the reason he won't do the transplant is me, and will you leave me for him?" I stunned, and then I got angry. "No, why would he do that? I'm not choosing between you and him." I took his hand off my shoulder and looked into his eyes. "Athan, are you stopping me because Jack is my lawfully husband, and you don't care if he lives because you never cared about him?" He didn't speak for a while, and then he stepped aside. "Your car is downstairs," he said. I didn't look back when I left, and I didn't see his hurting face. I got to the hospital as fast as I could, and when I pushed the ward door open, Jack was staring at the window. He gave me a slight smile when I entered. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked. "It was the same weather as today, cloudy but warm, and you were sitting by yourself like you were lost." I said to myself, that girl must have been through something bad. "I understand you, Catherine. I know how lonely you are because I was the same." "Jack." I walked and stopped by the side of his bed. "There is something about me that I have never told you, but I think that I should." His expression as calm as always, he nodded and waiting for me to go on. I hesitated. On my way to the hospital, I thought of so many ways of telling him the truth. Where should I begin? How he will react? But when I actually saw his face, the words stuck in my mouth and I forgot how to get them out. "I know what you are, Catherine." Jack spoke suddenly. "And I know Athan Buffay is your kind too." "You knew? How?" I was shocked. "Are you not scared?" "Why would I be scared? You will always be Catherine Green, my wife, and the mother of Mike and Lily. Nothing would ever change that." Jack looked at me with gentle eyes. "I do have a few questions." I felt relieved and a little thrilled. For all these years I had been lying to him about my identity and my past, which tortured me, and now I could finally tell him everything. "Go ahead, ask me anything," I said. Jack sat up and held my hands. "Is Athan Buffay the father of Mike and Lily?" "No, of course not." I was so surprised by his question. "Why would you ask that?" "Then do you know who is the father of the kids?" he asked, and I hesitated. Ever since I found out that I could have a wolf, which means I certainly could have a mate, I had been confused about the man from 5 years ago. For all this time I thought he was a drunk werewolf who forced me. Now I was not so sure anymore. But what should I say to Jack? Yes, there was a big chance that he was my destined mate. I shook my head and said, "A werewolf, but I don't know who. I don't even remember his face." "So it could be anyone. Then why are you certain that it's not Athan Buffay?" Jack spoke fast as if he predicted my answer. But he had confused me. I looked at him and it felt like it was the first time I know the real Jack Harden. He was calm, aggressive, and beyond doubt. "What's your point, Jack?" "My point is, Athan Buffay is a dangerous man, and I would never take his bone marrow if the price is losing you," he said firmly, and I was truly puzzled. "Jack, you have to take the transplant. It's the only way you can survive. Mike and Lily are still waiting for you. Are you going to leave them, leave your family?" "That is exactly why I won't do it, because I am saving my family. Athan Buffay is a dangerous man, and I have found something about him, and when I confirm it, I will show you," Jack said in a very strong tone. "Jack," I couldn't believe him. Just when I was about to say more, Jack interrupted me. "Catherine, I love you," he laughed, but tears ran down his cheek. "I have loved you since I know you, and I will protect you from those who might hurt you. I would never ever let Athan Buffay take you away from me." It started rain when I left the hospital. Jack refused to say more about Athan or reconsidering the transplant. I felt lost and sad. I guessed I had always knew about Jack's feelings, and there was one point I thought I loved him too, but then I realized that it was more thankful than love. Athan called me, but I didn't answer. I was tired, and I didn't want to talk to anyone. Why did I have to make such choice? When I came home, the kids had just had their afternoon snack. They were excited to see me, and hugged me for the longest time. I took them to the backyard to play. Lily took me to her dollhouse and showed the prince she had found for her favorite doll. Gloria met her prince at a dancing party, and they live happily ever after. She was so excited, showing me the prince and the princess, and pointed at Mike, who was playing his toy car. "Mike said that you have a prince too." I got startled by my daughter, and then I realized that Mike probably told her about Athan Buffay. I hadn't been talking to him after I left the hospital because I didn't know what to say to him. I said some harsh things before I left, but his attitude toward Jack really worried me. "Mommy, look, a bunny." Lily grabbed the corner of my shirt and pointed at the garden, and following her finger, there was a pure white bunny sitting. Suddenly, a figure rushed over with great speed and grabbed the rabbit. It was my son, Mike. "Wow, Mike, you are the best!" Lily cheered, but I suddenly recalled what Athan said to me before. Super strength, super speed, heightened senses, super agility. Mike showed his size of wolf in such a young age. Did their father also have the genes of a primitive werewolf? This thought startled me, but it also made me realize that I had to find out as soon as possible what the medicine Thana and my stepmother were giving me that restrained my wolf. Thinking of all the weird dreams I had been having recently, I felt that it was necessary for me to find out more about this. I needed to go back home, where I was originally from. When I walked past the border, I saw the sign of Blue Moon Pack. It'd been 5 years when I finally came back. While surprisingly, I did not feel very excited. As I walked in the camp, I saw some familiar faces. A lot of them used to dislike me and avoided me because I was always the weakest. Seeing me come back, different expressions showed up on their faces. Some she-wolf deltas were training on the course, and I had mixed feeling when I saw them. Once I was a girl who would trade everything to get her father's attention, to have the chance to join the delta trainings. How ironic. All these time I was trying hard for nothing, because my stepmother Ann West already decided my fate for me by drugging me. I looked back and walked to a house. This was my home until 5 years ago. My own father kicked me out of it. I couldn't help but felt nervous, and with letting out a sigh, I knocked on the door. After a few seconds of waiting, the door was opened. My stepmother Ann West stunned at the door, but I wouldn't give her much time to process this. I knocked on her shoulder with mine and walked in. "What are you doing here, little bitch?" Her screamed behind me with a sharp voice. "You really haven't changed at all, mother." I smiled, ignoring her, and went to my original room. The room was turned into a study room with a whole row of bookshelves. I stepped forward, took out a book and flipped through it, ignoring Anne, who was furious behind me. "How are you came back here? You are kicked out. You don't belong here." She yelled at me and walked forward to push me. "Get out of my house!" I grabbed her wrists calmly, and she was startled by my action. Perhaps she never thought that one day the obedient Catherine Green would dare to fight back. She struggled hard, but I didn't let go. If it was before, I certainly won't be a good match to Anne. But ever since I fought David Hunter, my overall strength had improved a lot. Anne couldn't get rid of me so easily. It's funny, you know. I have seen Thana a couple times in Diamond City, I smiled and said to her, and Thana told me about what you did to me. "Thana, you have seen her. Where is she? Where is my daughter?" Anne went furious when I mentioned Thana, which surprised me, but that's not my concern for now. I pushed Anne away and asked her loudly, "What was the drug you gave me that restrained my wolf?" Hearing my words, Anne's face turned pale, but then she kept her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." I approached her slowly, and she was forced by me to back away. I looked at this guilty woman in front of me, whom I used to call mother, but she treated me in such a vicious way. Finally, she was cornered by me. She yelled and pushed me away. "Go away! You disgusting little bitch! You deserved it! You don't deserve to have a wolf!" Her words made me angry, and I really wanted to hit her hard. At this moment, a voice sounded, "What are you talking about? Catherine has a wolf." I stopped my action and turned to the man in front of me, whose face was full of surprise. "Hello, father," I said. "You drugged her? Are you out of your mind?" My father, Luther Green, had been yelling at my mother since I told him about the drugs, and my stepmother, sitting on the chair, didn't dare to speak back, only staring at me with her vicious look. I just stood there watching it all, as if I wasn't the one who was drugged, framed, and abandoned. I didn't feel sad or aggrieved. Those emotions had been devoured by me as early as these 5 years of ordeal. I looked at my father, who was now flushed with anger, pointing at his wife with his hands shaking. But honestly, I didn't think that he was acting like that because he was sorry for me. After all, Ann West wouldn't have had the chance to do those things to me without his indulgence. If he really ever thought of me as his daughter, he wouldn't let me be bullied for so many years. Therefore, his current anger might be more due to his shame. "How do you expect me to treat her knowing that you had her with another woman?" Anne cried out loud, and I wasn't surprised, as tears had always been her weapon toward my father. She wiped her face and said in a low voice, "I never meant to hurt her. I just thought that she was too weak to be a Delta. That's why I—" "Shut up!" my father shouted at her face. "Do you even know how much I have been blamed for this? As the Gamma of our pack, my daughter was a useless Omega because of you." I couldn't help but laugh, which caught both their attentions. My father seemed to finally realize that I just heard his selfish speech, and he walked up to me with guilt and said, "Catherine, I'm sorry about what happened. Let me make it up to you. You should come home." "No thanks." I stepped back and kept my distance and said, "I just need to know the name of the drug and I'll find the cure myself." "Catherine, my child, let me help you." He reached out his hand to me, but I shook my head and smirked. I was such a foolish before, and I believed that one day I would proud my father while all he ever cared about was himself. "Please, don't make this embarrassing. I don't belong here anymore." I smiled at him politely and turned to Ann West. "Tell me about the inhibitor drug, and I will tell you what happened to Thana." "I don't know the name. I got this from a werewitch many years ago." Ann took out an old wooden box and threw it to me. "Now tell me, what did you do to my daughter?" I roughly told them about David Hunter and Thana, and surprisingly, my father had no idea about Thana hooking up with David Hunter, while my stepmother looked anxious after she heard what happened to David. But none of that was my business. I took the box and stepped out. Just when I was leaving, my father called my name. He walked out the door and shut it behind him. "Do you know where she might go?" he asked. He still looked as strong as I remembered. However, at this moment, I no longer cared whether I would disappoint him or not. I shook my head and said, "I don't know." I didn't leave the pack when I said bye to my father, and I went to an old friend. Mona was one of the few kids that never bullied me as I grew up in the pack, and she was the daughter of the pack healer. I was always the weakest, and Mona would secretly treat my wound and bring me candies whenever she could. But unfortunately, I was always bullied by Ann and Thana during my teenage years, so I hardly had time to go out and hang out with her. Not to mention, when I got older, I had almost no freedom, so I didn't even get to say a proper goodbye when I was kicked out of the pack. Mona gave me a big hug when she saw me, and that was the warmest thing I got since I came back. "I'm so glad to see you. I didn't hear anything from you for 5 years." She held my hands and wouldn't stop talking. "I asked Tana about you once, but she said some bullshit, so I never talked to her again." "I'm sorry. I wanted to say goodbye to you, but the situation was—" "Kath, I understand." She smiled and stopped me. "I know how hard your life was, and I'm just happy that you are okay. Tell me, why are you suddenly back? Did something happen?" I handed her the box and told her about the drug. "I can't believe Anne would do that to you." She frowned and said, "I heard that werewolf potions can be very strong, but you said you could feel your wolf recently. That means some external factors stimulate your wolf. What could it be? I didn't have my wolf for 25 years, but suddenly I feel it again. What factor could cause it?" "Your mate, Catherine." She looked at me with concerns. "Only the mate bond can trigger your werewolf gene like that, and he must be a very strong werewolf." I exchanged phone number with Mona before I left, and she was concerned for me when I said bye, her word lingering in my head. "You should be very careful, Catherine. The werewitch drug basically locked up your wolf deep in your body, and once it breaks free, it might take over your body and lose control. You need to find your destined mate, whoever he is, because he might be the only person that can help you." My destined mate, the father of my kids, the man from 5 years ago. All the puzzles stared to putting together in my head, but only made me more frustrated. Where could I find a mysterious werewolf from 5 years ago? And even if I do, what should I say to him? Should I hate him? I looked at the books in my hands, which I borrowed from Mona, and these were records about the primordial werewolf, including which packs had inherited their bloodline. After seeing my son Mike's rapid development as a werewolf, I couldn't help but doubt his blood. Besides, I had to start from somewhere. On my way back home, I got a phone call from the hospital, and it was from Jack's doctor, Dr. Sin. Jack is not doing too well right now. This afternoon, his blood pressure plummeted, and he experienced brief apnea. He was in a coma, and if he does not receive a bone marrow transplant soon, he will die at any time. I suggest you come to the hospital right now and maybe bring the kids too." My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and I had to hold the steering wheel tightly to keep driving. Jack was critically ill. What should I do? I headed straight back home and picked up the kids. "Mommy, are we going to see Papa Jack? Did he miss us?" Lily's naive voice made me feel so bad, and how was I supposed to tell them that their Papa Jack might leave them forever? I quickly wiped the corner of my eyes so they won't see my tears, and I drove as fast as I could to the hospital. "Miss Green, thank God you are here." Dr. Sin met us at the hallway, and he said with concerns, "I got contacted from Mr. Athan Buffay's medical team this morning, saying that they are ready for starting inject the mobilization drug for Mr. Buffay, so after 5 days his bone marrow can be harvested." Athan? He contacted the hospital? However, just when I was in contemplation, Dr. Sin continued, "However, Mr. Jack had informed me that he would not accept Mr. Buffay's bone marrow transplant, and he signed a waiver when he was conscious." I felt my breathing almost stop. Jack meant it, and he was actually going to give up his only chance. "Catherine, may I speak to you alone?" It was Jack's assistant, Dan. He led me to the other end of the hallway and said, "I know that this might be too much to ask, but Mr. Harden really needs your support right now. He had been talking to several private detectives recently, and every time after meeting with them, he got angry or very upset." Dan looked so worried and kind of embarrassed, but he continued, "As far as I know, he's been investigating about Athan Buffay and his company, and you. He's become very suspicious and irritable, and my apologies. I personally think a big reason why he's reluctant to have the transplant is because of you. He cares about you more than his life." Dan looked at me seriously, and he bowed deeply to me. "Please think of a way to convince him to do the transplant. Don't give up on him." Honestly, even though I had seen Jack's will, I was still shocked. He had been investigating Athan and me, and he even lost control of his emotions countless times because of this. I covered my face and teared silently. "Jack, I didn't deserve your love." When I brought the kids into the ward, Jack was in bed on a ventilator. Mike and Lily ran to his side and hugged him. Jack smiled happily after a long absence. He chatted with the children in a weak voice and asked them to sing a song for him. "Papa Jack, when are you taking us to a trip?" Lily asked him. "You see, I'm too sick right now, but I will make Mommy will take you, and Uncle Dan will go with you." Jack smiled at her. I saw tears in his eyes. "But we want you to join us too," Mike said to Jack, and he held his hand. "We will wait until you get better, so we can all go together." The kids were my last hope. I wish they would be persuasive than me. After letting them talk with Jack, I asked Dan to take them outside so I could talk to Jack alone. "Jack, please. They kids can't lose you." I was begging, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" Jack put away his gentle smile, looked into my eyes and said, "Okay, I will take the transplant, if you promise me that you will never see him again." Jack's expression was so determined, as if he was ready to say something. "He's forcing me to choose, whether to choose him to live, or to be with Athan Buffay and watch him die." At that moment, I felt that I hardly knew the man in front of me anymore. "You are joking, right?" I asked Jack, and my hands were shaking. "Please don't threaten me with your life." "I'm not, Catherine. I'm just simply asking you to make a choice, your family or a dangerous man you just met." Jack was very calm, and it was brutal to me. "This has been your plan all along, has it?" I cried and asked him. My heart hurt so bad when I saw him nodded. He propped himself up on his arms and looked up at me, looking very weak. "Kath," he lowered his voice, and his eyes were full of tears. "Please, I'm begging you, leave him, and everything will be back to normal. I will take the transplant, and I will throw you the most beautiful wedding." The air in the ward seemed to freeze. I looked at the white floor and fell into an unprecedented choice in my heart. What exactly should I do? As time passed by, I walked to Jack's side and let go of my clenched fist. I never felt that it would be so hard to speak. "Okay, I promise you. When you take the transplant, I will leave him. I won't see him again, but there won't be any wedding with you either." An excited expression appeared on Jack's face, and his voice trembled. "Really? Are you willing to leave him for me?" I nodded, fighting back my tears, and said, "You must recover quickly, okay?" "Of course." Jack grabbed my hand, his breath getting heavier with excitement. He clutched his respirator and said, "Trust me, everything will be as good as it used to be. Catherine." I asked Dan to take the kids home and then went to inform Dr. Sin about getting ready for the transplant. Walking out of the hospital building, I could no longer hold back my tears. I covered my heart and leaned down, suppressing and venting my grievances. I had to squeeze my arm hard enough to keep myself from howling. Maybe I was not born to deserve good things, but Jack had done so much for me that I couldn't be the cause of his death. My phone vibrated in my pocket and I turned it on. I got a message from Athan. "Catherine, I'm really sorry about what I said. I support you with 100%, so please don't be mad at me. I have contacted Jack's hospital and I will take my first mobilization drug tonight. We will find a way to convince him, I promise you. Just please come back first." His earnest words broke my heart, but what choice did I have? I put my phone back in my pocket and drove back to Athan's villa. When I opened Athan's bedroom door, he just got out of the shower. He stunned for a second when he saw me, then he ran and hugged me tight. "Catherine, you are back." He put his head on my shoulder and mumbled. My heart hurt so much, and a drop of tear fell down silently. I tapped his back and quickly wiped my face. "I convinced him," I said. "Jack will take the transplant." "That's good to hear." Athan's voice was low but gentle. "Now you can finally rest assured." I kissed his mouth before he finished that sentence. Guilt was eating me alive, and I just wanted to forget about everything for a second. I took off my jacket and pushed him inside. Athan was surprised, but soon he took over control. He gently rubbed my back and took off my clothes for me. I was falling in his scent, which made me feel safe and sound. He was tender but aggressive, and that was exactly what I needed. We held each tight. I felt like a sinking person got a hold of a piece of driftwood, and I was soaked in his love. At night, the medical team Athan hired came, and he was injected with the first round of mobilization drugs, which he needed to receive for 5 consecutive days before the bone marrow was harvested. The stem cell mobilization was a process whereby stem cells were stimulated out of the bone marrow space into the bloodstream, so they were available for collection for future reinfusion. The cells were then preserved, frozen, and stored until the time of transplant. Before they started, they told Athan that they planned to harvest his bone marrow from the hip bone, and he agreed to it. The process lasted for 3 hours, and according to the doctors, it shouldn't hurt too much. But after the first 2 hours, Athan suddenly started trembling. It startled me so much, and the medical team was shocked too. The healer told me that it could be because he was a werewolf, and his bodily function was more primitive and more sensitive than humans. Therefore, even though this drug was not dangerous for ordinary humans, it was a painful process for a strong werewolf like Athan, who was extremely self-healing. Just when I was about to call it off, Athan stopped me. "It's okay, I can take it." He smiled at me, but I could see the cold sweats on his forehead. Jack doesn't have much time. I held his hand tight and couldn't control but burst out with tears. "Athan, thank you, and I was so sorry. Mr. Buffay really cares about you, Catherine," Marcus said to me. "As our alpha, it is very risky for him to risk his life like this." The doctors had left, but Athan was still resting. The mobilization drug made him extremely uncomfortable, but he smiled at me the whole time during the session. I knew everything Marcus said, as I felt it, and enjoyed it, but I would soon break his heart. God, even thinking of it, made me suffocating. I walked in his room and sat on the side of his bed. His eyes were closed, and there were sweats on his forehead. Even when he was in discomfort, he looked manly and so attractive. I couldn't help myself but stroke my fingers on his face, his chiseled jaws and great hair. Suddenly, he grabbed my fingers and opened his eyes. His eyes were laughing with tenderness, and his voice was deep. "Hey, love." His smile made me smile. "How are you feeling now, Athan?" Not the best," he laughed and winked his eyes to me. "But if you can stay here tonight, I'm sure I will feel a lot better." He opened his arms toward me and tapped the bed. That's an invitation for me to join. I lied in his arms, closed my eyes. "Athan, thank you. Thank you for everything." He kissed on the back of my head and rubbed his palm on my shoulders. "Just remember that I would do anything for you, Catherine." A tear slipped from the corner of my eye and disappeared on the bedsheet. Thankfully that I had my back to him so he couldn't see my face. The next morning, the medical team came on time to inject mobilization drugs for Athan. When I walked out of the room, I saw that both sides looked serious, and Marcus even said something to Athan angrily. "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" I asked. "Don't worry, everything is fine." Athan smiled at me and turned to the doctor. "You may start." Just when I was about to ask more, I saw the doctor took out double the amount of drugs from yesterday. "Wait, why does he need more drugs?" I walked forward and asked in hurry. "Athan, what is happening?" "Mr. Buffay's body has been rejecting the mobilization drug," the doctor sighed and said. "We think it's because he is a werewolf. His body is very resistant to injectable drugs." I got confused more. They knew Athan's true identity? "Oh, don't worry. We have been serving Mr. Buffay for years, and we have all signed non-disclosure agreements." The doctor explained to me. "Mr. Buffay, my apologies." Marcus bowed and said seriously, "Your health is very important to everyone. Please don't risk it. Please give me a couple of days, and I will find Jack Harden a new donor." Athan raised his hand and stopped Marcus from talking. "Marcus, I know that you are worried, but I know my body. I will be fine. Besides, we don't have time to find another person. He needs the transplant as soon as possible." My heart clenched with guilt. "Athan." I looked at him and didn't know what to say. I was literally the worst person in the world, as I took advantage of him and lied to him while he was risking his life for me. "It's okay, love," he smiled gently. "Come and hold my hands and I will feel better." "Athan, I was so sorry. I didn't deserve you." I clenched my fist and tried my hardest from bursting tears. Over the next 4 days, Athan completed all injections, and on the 5th day doctors collected hematopoietic stem cells from him. I went with his medical team when they delivered the cells, and I met with Dr. Sin, Jack's doctor. He was very glad and chatted with me about Jack and the coming up transplant surgery. "Our medical technology is the most advanced in the country, so don't worry. Your husband will be fine." He said that while walking me out, Jack's ward was not far from his office, and he said, "Jack should be awake right now. The nurse just took him back from a full-body check. You can go see him if you want." After I thanked him, I stood at the door of Jack's ward. He was reading a book, frowning slightly. He was pale, and long illness had made him very thin and weak. However, his eyes had never changed, always elegant and clear. But honestly, I didn't know how to face him at the moment. I didn't blame him. Love makes people brave, but also makes people cruel. While he was forcing me, he was also pushing himself to the edge. I didn't deserve much love in the first place. I was born alone and abandoned countless times. However, Jack had never abandoned me or despised me. I owed him so much, so if I could save his life, I wouldn't hesitate, even if that meant I had to leave the man that I love. I quietly left his ward and walked out of the hospital building. My phone rang, and I picked it up. It was the real estate agent I had contacted. "Miss Green, I found the best apartment for you. When are you free to come and see it?" "I can come over right now," I said to her. "Please prepare the contract. I would like to sign it if it's suitable, and I will move in as soon as possible." The apartment was located in a newly developed community in the south of the city. This apartment was just renovated last year. The owner wanted to live by himself, but he needed to move to another city for work, so he would like to rent it out as soon as possible. The realtor lady opened the door and said to me, "The location is perfect. It has convenient transportation and is very close to a private kindergarten. You said that you want to transfer school for your children. This kindergarten is very welcome to the residents living in this area." I walked around the apartment and looked out the window. The 2-bedroom apartment was not big and the rent was very expensive. But besides that, it was perfect for me, far from the city center, surrounded by shopping malls and supermarkets. And most importantly, the agency served high-end customers, so they could keep customer information confidential, which meant no one would find me and my kids, and we could start a new life. Perfect. I will take it. I nodded to the realtor lady. She took out the contract paper and passed it to me. "You can sign here, and the apartment will be yours by tomorrow." "Actually, my roommate will sign the paper." I pointed to the other side of the room. Mona looked at me with her arms crossed and rolled her eyes. Then she smiled at the real estate agent and said, "Yes, I'll sign. What ID do you need again?" A few hours earlier, I called Mona and asked her to do me a favor. "You should thank your dad for making all the younger wolves in the pack register the identifications from the human society. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to help." That was the first thing she said to me when she arrived. Although the real estate agency promised to protect my information, I wouldn't think they could hide any information from Athan. And now that I'd decided to start a new life, I had to disappear from his world. Though we had feelings for each other in the past few months, I was never good enough for him. One day, he would meet his mate and forget about me. As for me, I would be fine as long as I had my kids around. "Thanks, Mona," I walked her to the car and said, "I really don't know what to do without you." "Come on, friends don't say thanks." She hugged me and poked my face. "Have you been eating at all? You look skinny as hell. Eat more and worry less, all right?" I nodded and smiled. At least I had my friend who supported me, even though I never really told her what happened to me. As I was driving back, I got a phone call from Athan. "Hey, where are you?" He sounded happy. "I'm on my way back. I thought you went to your company?" I tried to make myself sound normal. "I finished work." His voice was so gentle. "I am hoping we can have dinner together." His tone sounded excited, but I was already in tears. I took a deep breath and said softly, "Sure, I want to have a chance to talk to you too." The lights were off when I got back to the villa. I walked to Athan's room and knocked on his door, but nobody answered. "Athan?" I called his name. I could sense his scent in the room, but I didn't know where he was. Suddenly, his warm hands covered my eyes, and his deep voice whispered to my ears, "Welcome home, my dear." I grabbed his hands and moved them from my eyes, and at the same time, I heard he snapped his finger. The lights were on, not the room's light, but the delicate decorative lights hanging on the curtains and doors. The orange light made the whole room look very warm. Before I could talk, Athan put his fist in front of me. He moved his fingers, and a silver necklace appeared in his hand. It was a finely crafted silver chain with a crescent-shaped pendant. I was a little surprised when I saw the beautiful curvature of the crescent moon. "Athan, what?" Before I finished my words, he gently lifted the hair from my neck and put the necklace on for me. "I made this myself," he said softly, "for you." I touched the necklace around my neck, and the silver crescent still bore Athan's body temperature and smell. Athan turned me around to face him and stared at the necklace for a while. His eyes were shining like there were stars hidden in them, and he asked, "Do you like it?" His eyes were so sincere that I could barely meet his eyes. How could I tell him that I couldn't be with him and that I didn't deserve him to be so nice to me? "Athan, Catherine, tell him, don't be selfish. Thank you, I love it." My eyes were blurred. I guess I was crying. "I was sorry, Athan. Just let me be selfish for one last time." He gently wiped my tears and kissed my cheek. Then he held me in his arms tightly. "Don't ever take it off, promise me," he whispered, and I answered him by covering his mouth with mine. That night, I gave him all the passion and love I could ever give. "Catherine, you selfish liar," a voice deep in my head sounded,